The Three RoOs podcast.
All right, so tonight we are going to have our much anticipated talk, I guess we could call it. I think it's going to start as a talk about, the pharmaceutical companies in the world. Obviously, the hot topic in that is going to be vaccines. Obviously, the hot topic when we start talking about vaccines is going to be talking about the COVID vaccine. Um, let's start off by saying, again, none of us are medical professionals. None of us are well versed in immunology, virology, any of those types of topics. So a lot of what we're going to be saying is opinions. If we have sources, we're going to point out the sources. If we don't have sources, we're going to do our best to say we've read this, but we don't know more. Really, I think our goal for tonight is just to have a civil conversation, hear what everybody's talking about, hear different sides of arguments. Um, yeah, that's about it. So I think we're going to lead this off. Um, each just kind of talking about our thoughts on big pharma, our thoughts on vaccines, anything to start, 4 or 5 minutes. I think someone's going to talk, no interruptions. I'll leave it to you guys. We can either do one person talk and then comment on it, or all three of us can give our kind of spiel and then we can go from there. What do you guys think?
And like all three of us giving our spiel, and then we can see where we all lie and then ask questions of each other and stuff. And obviously, this is going to end up on aliens somehow. I think you left that part out, but at some
Yeah,
point, aliens
I
going
mean,
to
I
go
think, I
on.
think we probably, you know what? I'll put that in the group chat later. But it just came up with an idea. I'll throw it in my notes. Um,
No,
Rich,
so
Based on aliens.
yes, I'll take notes on your guys'
Yeah,
stuff. So I have
make a
questions for you.
three-way Venn diagram.
exactly,
What do we have
exactly.
in
Those are,
common? What don't we have in common? I can go first if you want.
yeah. Go ahead.
All right, so I'm gonna preface mine with I'm grateful to live in this country and be alive during this era. Um, living in the US, we have the best quality of life of almost any country. I think I was looking some numbers up before. A quarter of the world doesn't have safe access or access to safe drinking water. Almost half the world doesn't have basic sanitation needs met. So between that and just we're not worried about um, anything dangerous. We all can lay our heads at night down easy. We're not worried about somebody coming murdering us every night. So I think where 200 years ago that was probably a little bit different across the world. So grateful to live in this time, best time ever to be a human. Um, I do think vaccines in the pharmaceutical industry have helped um, prolong human life for the most part. Um, but I think the major issue for me is that I think a lot of the long-term side effects of some of the drugs and some of the, um, I guess mostly drugs and vaccines, have been kind of swept under the rug, or anytime they're mentioned, it's kind of pushed to the wayside. Specifically, I've seen some things on, I don't have any specific studies or anything to reference, but, autism, asthma, diabetes, MS, arthritis, all things that have been mentioned to be correlated with vaccines, particularly, I think, in some other drug use. Uh, Again, we mentioned I'm an engineer, so I don't really have any background in immunology or anything, but I believe that most vaccine studies and pharmaceutical studies are funded by the large pharmaceutical industry companies. Um, uh, One thing I did look up before this, 65 to 75% of human drug funding for the FDA is funded by pharmaceutical companies, and 40% of the vaccine regulatory activities is funded by pharmaceutical companies. So kind of seems a little funky there. It's right on their website. I did look that one up right before this call. And then listening to the Joe Rogan and RFK Jr. podcast earlier, he mentioned the CDC of their $12 billion budget, 5 billion of it also comes from the four large pharmaceutical companies. So I couldn't find that one listed anywhere. I think they kind of guard that information a little more because it's donated. And I went to the website. I saw there's a large anonymous donor. And they could be donating under people's names and shit. I don't really know, but so I don't know where his source was, but He mentioned that. Um, quick Googling around, I also found 75% of funding for clinical trials are funded by large corporate sponsors. So for me, it just seems like there's uh, an ethical dilemma there, right? Um, that the companies are paying for for the trials, and they're paying for a portion of the regulatory budgets of the companies who are developing the laws. Um, and we kind of talked about before the episode. It's just funny in the U.S. that the U.S. is one of only two countries that allows drug makers to market prescription drugs directly to the public. So I think that's got to end. RFK Jr. mentioned if he's elected president or something, that's one of the first things on his list. Um, so in general, that's my, kind of, it just seems like there's some funky shit going on. And I think because a lot of those studies are funded by the companies themselves, they can kind of throw out studies that don't uh, play to their narrative or play to their usage, right? That maybe they get swept aside, or they can kind of manipulate the data. Um, just my feeling. And so leading into COVID, I think my issues there, and I think I kind of, maybe I just listened to Rogan too much, but I kind of align with what his thought process there was. The issue with me is that the kind of the narrative changed along the way. At first, it seemed to be it stops transmission, then it slows transmission. And now maybe there's some studies out there that says it actually, you're more likely to get the disease, more likely to get COVID now the more shots you've taken. Again, mentioned on Rogan, I don't know the studies that they were talking about. I think he talks about them on there. Um, and I think it's interesting that we allow doctors who aren't immunologists to prescribe these things and be the experts. There are some people who should be experts and are the experts, but we rely on our, personal doctors to prescribe these things. And sometimes maybe, I guess maybe that's not in reference to COVID, it's more in vaccines in general. But um, they're really not the experts in this. They went to fucking medical school 30 years ago. Shit's changed, and maybe they're not up on the most recent studies. Um, and biggest issue for me was the government forcing the public to get the vaccine. Um, uh, Not everyone necessarily, but a lot of private companies, a lot of federal government employees had to get it, or they lost their jobs. Um, I know I'd seen plenty of people had to leave the military because they're forced. They didn't want to get the vaccine. They couldn't get an exemption for it, and then turn around a few months later. Now they're not requiring the vaccine anymore because it was illegal or whatever. So I think that was the biggest thing that rubbed me wrong. I don't think vaccines in general are a bad idea, bad thing. I just think that, um, especially with COVID, that it wasn't done in the safest manner because they had to get it out quick, right? They had to get it out quick, is what they were saying. Um, and so obviously some things you're not going to be able to look at long-term side effects of things that you have to get a drug out in a year. You're not going to know what happens in 5 years. Um, so I think that's my opinion.
Dude, I think you and I did a lot of the same research. It's a little creepy. Like a lot of the things you mentioned are pretty spot on, keyed into the same areas I talked about. Well put. Rich, you want to go or you want me to go?
Um, I could go. I can go.
All right.
So I think overall, when it comes to, let's start with vaccines. I think when it comes to vaccines, they're a great thing. And when I say that, I mean vaccines in general. I don't mean specifically the COVID vaccine, but in general, we've seen diseases be, essentially wiped out because of vaccines, right? Polio and smallpox, a number of things, right? Measles. Um, and this has been proven over the course of literally decades at this point, right? So that's been a good thing. So I'm a big supporter of that. Now, before I kind of get into the COVID vaccine, I would say that to kind of address one of your points. Um, so the COVID vaccine was rolled out quickly. However, the technology behind the vaccine wasn't anything new, right? This was something that's been around since I think the early 2000s. I think firstly with maybe SARS or something like that. So this is a technology that's been around for a while. And I do think that moving forward, mRNA vaccines are going to be extremely popular, sort of like, the newest technology and kind of how we go about this. Um, unfortunately, I do think because of a lot of the blowback and the way that it was handled, there's a lot of mistrust now when people hear mRNA, right? So I think that that's unfortunately like a long-term effect of what we saw. But I do want to be clear. I think this isn't a new technology, but I think with COVID, it was rolled out very quickly. And so new technology, or sorry, older technology, new virus, probably not enough time for clinical studies for long-term effects. Okay. To kind of shift back though, big pharma, I think just healthcare in general in the US, I think, look, a lot of people say Europe has a better system. Who's really to say that, right? They're like, oh, it's free. Well, it's not really free because you're paying taxes. You know, they talk about things like waiting periods and they still have to pay. In the US, there's certainly waiting periods. I had to wait like, over a month to go to a dentist, and like, dermatology is always out. So it's sort of like, you're either paying with taxes or you're paying out of pocket. I do think though that in our society, it's sort of crazy to think that we live in a society where if you don't have a job that covers your health care, it's still unaffordable even after like Obamacare or whatever the hell that's actually called, the Affordable Health Care Act. I do not think people should have to make a choice between. I think one politician may have said this, and I don't like to quote politicians necessarily, but it was like having to choose between your life and having to choose between having a home to live in, right? I think it's absurd that we've made pharmaceuticals and healthcare so unaffordable. So if we look at New York City and a lot of other cities, like there's a lot of homeless people that couldn't afford their medications for like, mental health and stuff like that. Long story short, I think that big pharma, there's positives and there's negatives to it. I think that healthcare and big pharma, some things are just way too unaffordable and the margins are way too high. I think we should probably look into capping margins. Um, and I'm saying that without any sort of, background in any of this. I should also preface this too. The same way. I'm not an expert in any of this. I'm not an economist. I'm not a healthcare expert or a doctor or anything like that. But still, I think we need to make it affordable. I think that big pharma, the positive is that big pharma has been able to afford to launch new drugs, do trials, right? Do the R&D for these things. And so they need that funding and they need that revenue in order to continue to essentially pioneer certain things. Now, side conversation is, do they buy things and make them sit on a shelf? Do they want to treat people long term versus cure? That's a whole other thing. So big pharma has its pluses and negatives. You would mention doctors that aren't immunologists like can prescribe. You didn't agree with that. I think I get what you're saying, but I feel like in order to get somebody healthcare quickly, we don't want to put them through a whole series of having to see 5 doctors before they can, you know, get some sort of treatment. So if immunologists are endorsing something, then I think it should be okay for a doctor to prescribe that. Now, going back to the vaccines, I agree. There's a lot of back and forth. There's a lot of trust issues now that are going to carry forward in a lot of other ways. I mean, look, I personally think that it became it became a political thing, right? That was sort of at the forefront of it. Healthcare wasn't at the forefront of it. Politics was. I don't want to really get into why I think that was, but I think both sides were just trying to check each other. I think that forcing people to get vaccines is, in my opinion, unconstitutional or just completely un-American. I understand that a lot of people, maybe healthcare experts, want this to try and get people to be not where they can't contract the virus. To your point, it did kind of go back and forth too on that, but to make it be where your side effects weren't as bad, it would evolve over time and become weaker and weaker. Like I get that argument. But when we look at like companies forcing people to get vaccines, otherwise you can't work here. That's like denying people opportunities if something they don't believe in, they don't want to put in their body. I think that's wrong. Military thing. If we look up at Canada, I mean, I don't know a whole lot about the situation, but it sounded like some of those truck drivers had their bank accounts frozen. I hope that's accurate. That's all I've seen about it. I don't want to spread misinformation on that, but I think anytime that there's some sort of forcing someone to put something in their body, I think it's unconstitutional. I think it's un-American. Overall, I think I would like to think that this vaccine, I would like to think that we're not going to see some long-term effects. I would like to think that net it was a large positive. But I'm not sold on that. And I do think there are some shady things to your point. I also think it's shady that people can't sue. I mean, there's a lot of shady things, but I'm sort of on the fence of whether it was a good thing or a bad thing. I'm sort of leaning more towards, well, I could say this. I think everyone should have a choice whether they want to get it or not. If they don't want to get it, they shouldn't be shamed. And people who did get it shouldn't be shamed either.
Well put. This is great. I love this already. All right. I'm gonna start off. Rich likes to remind me all the time that I am a doctor, actually. So no, I kid. I again, not a doctor, not an immunologist, not a market person, none of those types of things. These are all my opinion. I was originally going to read what I wrote at 4 a.m. this morning when I woke up. That's just crazy, especially after what you guys have said. Actually, a lot of what has been said is I could just sit here and piggyback on it, right? There's a lot of good that Big Pharma's done. There's a lot of bad that Big Pharma's done. You know, things that we probably only gloss over tonight, but also should be thought of in Big Pharma world is right now everybody associates Big Pharma with vaccines, but people tend to forget that Big Pharma is behind the opioid crisis. Cut and dry. There's plenty to be said about that. Go watch any one of 15 documentaries. Big Pharma is the reason fentanyl's out there. Fentanyl is in a ton of drugs. People die of fentanyl overdoses all the time. So, you know, sometimes numbers can be misleading. I believe one or two papers I looked at today stated that pharmaceuticals are the third leading killer in our country. I think it's cancer, heart disease, and then pharmaceuticals. And I delved into that more. I did not find specific numbers. I did not find any type of pie chart breaking up what pharmaceuticals meant. But I just want to preface that when you say pharmaceuticals is the third largest killer in our country, remember that pharmaceuticals are vaccines, but they're also painkillers. They're also misprescriptions, which happen a lot. They're also taking your drugs improperly after they've been prescribed to you. So there's a lot of things that can be misconstrued in that sense. As far as vaccines in general go, where vaccines were when Jonas Salk created the polio vaccine to where we are today, it's apples and oranges, right? I mean, we're talking about a scientist who didn't put a patent on his shot because he wanted anybody and everybody to be able to make it and have it. And nowadays we're talking about, and I don't want to, specifically pinpoint, we can dive into it more later, but that's kind of why, again, my assumption is not truthful or not, but my assumption is that's why you're seeing these clinical trials and research studies being done by the companies themselves, is because they're not going to give Joe Schmo their vaccine and say, go do research on it, because Joe Schmo could take it and reverse engineer it and come out with their own brand of it. So that's probably why you're seeing those. Now, as far as data manipulation and things of that, scientific research, scientific review has been scientific review works is people not affiliated with any of the research that's done has to review and approve all of your data before something can be submitted and then put out there. And what happens sometimes is they will question your data and then you have to show them everything. And if you don't show them everything, they won't approve it and your paper does not get approved. Okay. Then there comes into things like impact factor. Again, things we don't need to spend much time diving into, but you could get it into journal down here that's got low impact factor versus something that's nature, which is one of the biggest impact factors in the scientific realm. Besides all of that, I think my biggest issue with pharma right now is things like insulin that people literally need to survive. There is no choice. There is no, I'll just get it next month when I have more money. The markup on something like insulin is disgusting. And that's for someone who has insurance. It's absolutely disgusting. There's no reason it should be that high. Things started looking up with Pharma Boy went to jail. I don't know his full story, but I believe he was involved in the EpiPen, where basically he made an EpiPen for about 10 cents and sold it for like $100. Figures are off. Don't quote me on anyway.
Astronomical numbers for it. Yeah.
But yeah, his markup was ridiculous. And he ended up, I believe he's still in jail for it. And that's when things started to look up. And yet here we sit years later. And I know people who struggle to get by because they got to pay $100 a month for insulin, which is something they need to survive. Right. So that's my biggest issue with big pharma is it's not affordable. It's become not affordable when it could be affordable. Certain things, yes, cost money. Obviously, an MRI costs a lot of money. It's a big machine. The maintenance is big. Like that type of stuff does tend to make more sense. Certain pharmaceuticals that, one, cost X to make and you charge Y for way up higher, doesn't make sense. But also you start looking at things when even doctors nowadays goes, yeah, I'm gonna write you a prescription for the store brand version, which is the exact same thing, but doesn't have Big Pharma's name on it, and it's half the price. Why is it half the price? Why does it need to be half the price? Where's the flexibility in that? Back to the vaccine side of things, I think where there's a bit of a difference is I agree no one should be forced. I don't like that term though, forced. I don't think people are forced to have vaccines. I think what happens is if you don't get vaccines, you are not able to do certain things that other people with vaccines are able to for the better health of everyone. And this goes past COVID, right? You need 3 or 4 different shots to go to college, and you can't go to college without them because a dorm is a breeding place for disease. And if you bring in measles, that could be bad for people, right? So I don't think it's turned into looking forced, and it's turned into looking forced because of all of the fallout with the COVID vaccine, but it's less of a forced and more of a you have to do it to get certain things. Now, COVID vaccine, we've all said it, it was rushed out. Certain things may have happened, certain things may have been done. I think what I saw in research is, and it was touched on, is the number of doses. And it looks like they're starting to get kind of a bell curve where if you take too many doses, now you're doing more harm than you're doing good. So there might be a sweet spot. Again, we're talking about a vaccine that's been around for 2 years that needs 15 years to figure things out like this, right? I think that makes it scary, but that also makes people who are saying, well, I don't know anything about it yet, so I'm not going to do it yet. What if I get hurt? Think of, I don't remember what deck it is, but all the mothers who took thalidomide for morning sickness, and then they had babies with birth defects. They were prescribed that, and then that was found to be bad. So I think the rush out kind of scares people. I think the blind trust kind of scares people. And I think you're right. The technology, it's fantastic. I strongly suggest anybody who has any interest read up on it. It is amazing technology. We're talking about taking things where you had to literally inject the actual live virus into people, and you no longer have to do that. So that's safer. But again, as mentioned, the way this all has happened so far, now that as a dark cloud over the word. So, my kind of stance is, personally, I think everybody should get them. I think everybody is smart to get them. They only help. I don't think people should get chastised for not getting them, but I think people who don't get them need to understand that that's going to handcuff them in certain ways, and rightfully so. And in the same tone, again, I just said, I don't chastise people for not getting them. I think people not getting them need to stop saying that people are forcing them and people are, disowning them. That might be happening, but it's not happening. There's this big divide of, if you get vaccines, you hate people who don't get them. And if you don't get vaccines, you're butting heads with people who do. And that's just not the case. It's the same as everything else. It's extremists on both sides. So that's my 2 cents for now.
So the only thing I disagree with is that people weren't forced to get the COVID vaccine. Government employees were forced.
I was going to say yes, and
private...
I disagree with that. I disagree that they shouldn't have been. The people who should have been, and this is where I got a bad taste in my mouth, medical professionals should have had to get it. I don't know why you would not have gotten it as a medical professional. You see it every single day. You're putting people on ventilators every single day. You are pulling plugs every single day.
I think it's the difference between that and the other vaccines that have been around for 20, 30, 50 years and have had thousands of studies done on them, right? That they just didn't want to introduce something that had felt rushed, right?
Right. And again, I understand the hesitation. I think the thought process, I have behind it is, if you get in a car, there's a chance you could die, right?
Pretty good chance.
If you throw on your seatbelt, there's still a chance you could die, but there's a heck of a lot less chance of you dying.
Right.
So,
but the counter for people who don't believe in vaccines is that if if vaccines are causing issues of long-term health issues, they wouldn't have had that if they had gotten the vaccine.
Right. Now, if we look at the COVID vaccine, I don't think we can use the term long-term yet. We just can't.
Right. No, I
Because
agree.
it's not around. I think there's a black cloud over the fear of long-term because all of the negativity that other vaccines have gotten. So you mentioned autism, right?
Yeah, I
So that
forget
was
which one that's
actually
from.
vastly, it used to be a chain of children's ones. And I had an article and I should have left it pulled up, but my computer died and I don't feel like going through history.
It was measles and something
So
else, I think, right?
yes,
Yeah.
it was a chain of children's ones. And the guy who claimed that ended up, it found out, one, that he lied on his studies, and two, that he had a massive conflict of interest in doing his studies. Basically, his funding was private funding for someone who was also backed by people who needed him to shut down these vaccines. Again,
Right.
I had the article. I can find it again. I just don't have it right
That
now.
was one study, though. I think there's been plenty.
Oh yeah, no, most of them have
Yeah.
been discounted because there was one, starts with a T and there's a Y in there. It was an ingredient that was in vaccines in the early 90s. First of all, that ingredient no longer in vaccines. It was a preservative. It's no
Did you
longer
know
in vaccines.
RFK Jr. was talking about in the podcast with Rogan. They were putting, I guess there's two kinds of mercury, and
this is one of the kinds, but it was less. So it's less than in a fish that you would eat.
right. But they were finding that at least his conversations with the people who determined that it was a safe level, when they went back to find the studies, they would never debate with him because they couldn't produce the information that said it was safer. Like crazy shit.
I mean, I wouldn't, I can't speak to that. What
Yeah.
I can speak to is people who use that argument today don't
It's
have
different.
basis because there aren't those in vaccines anymore. No
Right.
vaccine has
He
those.
was talking about previous
Right.
vaccines.
Right. The other one that's big that you see that bugs me a lot is religious exemption. That drives me bonkers because it is so abused. It is so abused. People just basically claim I go to church, so my church tells me I shouldn't get vaccines. No, religious exemption was made for back when they used things like parts of a pig as part of vaccines, right? Which again, no longer a thing, but they used to. And so certain religions, Muslims, some of the other ones who don't consume that couldn't get that vaccine because pig is a dirty meat, right? And that's part of it. The other part of it is people who don't use Western medicine, right? So those are the only people who could truly say, I have a religious exemption, so don't give me the shot. Now, again, that's not even COVID based. I think that people just tried to use that in the COVID life, and I'm pretty sure that no one got religious exemption in the COVID life, but it's one that you see that one a lot in children who aren't allowed into kindergarten because they haven't gotten their shots. Is their parents go, well, we go to church and they say we should. Okay, what church do you go to? And then they list some non-denominational that has no connection to any restrictions. So definitely not speaking from experience for anyone.
Well, I got a couple questions. Were you gonna ask one, Tyler?
Yeah. You go. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I think one thing that was curious when you were talking about the healthcare workers, and they were like seeing people on ventilators and unplugging people and all that. I think the one thing that struck me was that there was a divide between healthcare providers, right? There's a lot of doctors that were coming out and they were saying like, do not get this. And, um, so I think that did strike me because what point then do you say, well, which one's right? Right. It's easy to say, well, the other one's wrong because they're stupid and I'm a better doctor. It's like, okay, I don't know you from Adam. It's like an argument from authority in some ways. It makes no sense, right?
I agree with that. I think my counterpoint to that is what we discussed earlier, though, is how many of those doctors saying no, don't get it, specialized in virality, specialized in immunology.
Yeah, I don't know.
And how many of them are,
I'm sure there were some though. That's what I'm
no,
saying.
I agree.
And they probably reference
sure
studies too,
I'm sure they were.
How as a regular person do you determine what's right? You have to believe in the pharmaceutical companies.
So that's a question. So that's in my notes. That's a question I phrase all the time is, when did we stop believing in the people whose jobs it were to do these things? Look,
mean,
I'm not going to sit
personally,
here and say that Anthony Fauci is a saint. He's not by any stretch. And anyone who thought it was a good idea to put a microphone in front of his face regularly is an idiot. Okay. I deal with science people regularly, and they are not well spoken at all. They are not good talking to crowds. They're socially awkward. They have struggles finding words to explain things. So to limelight someone like that is a horrible idea. Absolutely horrible idea. And I think that again help to pair people. They see someone who's stumbling over his words. They see someone who says something and then 2 weeks later says something different.
The email leak was probably a huge hit to his credibility.
Yes.
It was
But
a huge, not probably.
I mean, it was.
Personally, the older I get and the more life experiences I have, the less I trust in our government, and especially when
So that's
large
it.
pharmaceutical companies have the ability to line the pockets of fucking
And
government
you just said it.
officials.
You just said it, and I agree 100%. And in a way, it ties back to my first point. Is
That's
I
when
mean, Fauci was a puppet for politics, right?
yeah.
There's no reason he should be standing with politicians behind him making statements. If you're a true scientist, first of all, if you're a true scientist, you don't have any fucking time to do press conferences. You're in the lab for 15 hours a day. So, you know, that's where, and that's why I asked the question, when do we start? And you answered it perfectly when it was, because it's no longer doctors.
Right.
Politicians should not be the ones telling us how to take it. Now, they
And
should
neither
be
should the
involved in,
pharmaceutical
they
company. They
should
shouldn't
be
be paying the
involved
regulatory
in
agencies.
right. Well, and if you'll see, there's a lot of headbutting in the CDC right now. There's a lot of headbutting in the WHO right now because there's a lot coming out about who actually runs them. They're all elected officials. If you think about it, the people who run the CDC, the people who run WHO are elected officials. They might be medical backgrounds, but they're still elected, which means they still have to win people over.
Right.
You're not giving it by merit.
Who's voting for? So who's electing them?
So it's, I believe, could be wrong, but my assumption it's going to be is if you are part of the CDC, there's an election process that you take part in. Just like I have the ability to vote for who is the chairperson of my retirement fund, that type of thing.
Like, but the average citizen doesn't get to choose
No.
who sits.
Nope.
It's like the Supreme Court. You serve for life, but you're not actually elected by the people.
Mhm.
That to me makes no fucking
No,
sense.
it doesn't. And again, these are things that if you go back, the reason I find this a kicker, I don't know if you read this article or not, Tyler. I didn't realize that JFK, RFK's uncle, was at the forefront of pushing vaccines through. So he was president when Salk came out with the polio vaccine. And he basically signed into act the importance of getting it pushed out and getting people able to get it. And you read about how things happened there. And again, there was no privatization of it. There was no, this is mine, you have to buy it, or give me money and I'll teach you how to do it. It was to get everybody better. And it's sad that it's not come to that. And I think certain things like the COVID vaccine have muddied the water of other vaccines that are well tested and well proved to have worked.
That's
You can't sell me that the measles vaccine is dangerous. You just can't.
I don't know. I don't know. I mean,
it's
well,
been
I think
around.
The positive outweighs the negative.
I agree. I agree with that. I just don't know how safe it is. Right. I don't know if it's 1 in 1,000.
Right.
I
mean,
no one's gotten it.
You could.
Right, I just don't know. I agree. Yeah. No, I agree. It's
the vaccine.
Which one?
Measles.
Yeah. No, I agree. The benefits outweigh the negatives by far. I just don't know what the negatives are. No, I don't know what the problem rate of the negatives.
The problem is
right?
Everything that you're going to ever put into your body is going to have negatives. Tylenol has negatives. Tylenol is actually a really terrible drug. If you actually look at it, because it's so misused, since it's over the counter, it rips apart people's liver, rips apart their kidneys. But yeah, so
if they take it every day or overconsume, right?
Oh, yeah.
So like women are taking that once a month for like 5 days straight.
That's fine, but that's fine. It's different. So
No, I'm saying
knew,
that's if it's a bad thing, we probably should try
but
and come up with an
that's
alternative.
not bad. That's not bad. Bad is
What?
taking it every 8 hours, period. So
Oh,
you're
okay,
taking
okay,
it 3 times a day, every single day, and you're
got it.
probably taking 1,000 milligrams, which you shouldn't be doing. So there was a guy I met when I lived
Our
up in
college,
Syria.
I don't mean to cut you off, but remember, I called one college roommate. I won't name his name, but he would have like 5 at a time when he would
Yes,
have a headache.
terrible.
I didn't know that.
But no,
Who's a
yeah, oh yeah,
doctor now, by the way?
he literally used to just pour him into his hand and just go. We do.
Yeah,
Is that?
yeah.
Oh,
Well, he's
but
not.
no, there
I
was a
don't think
guy.
he's an MD.
He was a Chicago or an NYPD. He was a cop in a big city, and he used to take Tylenol for his stress, and so he would chomp them like candy, and he had liver cirrhosis.
Mm,
You know, the thing you get from drinking too much, not too much
Right.
Tylenol.
mm.
You know how the adage when we were growing up was 2 Tylenol before you start drinking, and you'll be fine the next morning.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Horrible for your liver. Horrible for your liver because your liver is going to be digesting the alcohol before it digests the Tylenol.
Mm.
So
I
it
don't think
doesn't
I ever
actually
did
get to
that.
So,
horrible.
so I've got a couple topics
puffs.
on the COVID vaccine. 3
Roll them
topics.
out, man. I'm
Well,
loving this.
before we get there,
And they're
can I
more
just ask my second
conversational
question?
than the debates.
Yeah, no, I'm more. I think we can safely say that we actually are a lot closer on this than we all thought in that group text.
I
Yes,
thought one of us was
Yeah,
going
I'm
to
just
get
a
angry for
troll, so I
sure.
like to.
Yeah.
Well, can I just ask my second question though? Because I think.
you
Oh, yeah,
a
yeah.
troll.
Well, is this actually? I don't
You
even
should
know.
just you should just change your name to troll. But continue.
Yeah, I don't know if this is actually more of a question or if this is a statement, but I think the other point I wanted to make was when we talk about side effects and like it's not long term, but the thing that scares me quite a bit is that we're seeing a lot of reports about blood clots. We're also seeing reports or stories about people's heart swelling. And one healthcare professional that I know uh, has referenced quite a bit that multiple, like a lot of people that have been, I shouldn't say like a lot of people, like she knows that many, but there's been a number of people that have had blood clots and they're all vaccinated.
So
And to me,
I would be
yeah.
very curious to see the literature on that one. Because if we remember right, one of the vaccines was pulled for a whopping 48 hours, and then it was disproven that the blood clots were connected to it.
What was that, the
So
Johnson and Johnson one?
yes.
But so this was kind of like one of the topics I was going to bring up too. So one thing that, and I Googled it real quick and it kind of leads into another topic, but RFK Jr. mentioned in the Rogan podcast that something about we were seeing roughly mid 20s deaths per year of athletes on the field, like high school athletes who die of like a cardiac arrest on the field. And then now we're potentially seeing that number a month. And so I Googled it real fast, and all I see is, the first 5 or 10 links are all saying that's false, right? But what I don't understand, and this was leading into my other one, is, and what I don't know is what is actually just being censored. Like,
So
because
before,
you
no, it's
know
a
what
good
I mean?
question.
And
It's a good
how is
question.
Google?
Dude,
But I will
I've
say,
found stuff on
but I
Google
will
before
say,
that I could not find it
Here
2
we go.
hours later. I'm just gonna say it. Like
Here we go.
dude, it's happened. Like hand to God.
No, I believe it. And
Cannot find it
I
2 hours
believe
later.
some is, but here's the big problem. Again, speaking from my slightly more expertise in just
Bullshit.
looking
I'm just kidding.
at science,
Yeah.
correlation is a very, very dangerous tool. Okay. And it's seen on both sides. So in this case, you're saying, okay, people are dying from heart disease at a certain age. Now we're looking
athletes
at
on the field,
right,
deaths
whatever.
going up 12-fold.
Qualifier of person is dying.
Yeah,
Now you're saying qualifier of person is dying and they're vaccinated.
right.
Okay. But there is no statement saying that they are dying because they are vaccinated. They are just dying and they are, wait. The other side of that is way back when people were dying, and every time you saw it go, well, so and so died of COVID. And the other side would always come out and go, did they die of COVID or did they die of something else and they just happened to have COVID? Correlation is a very, very, very dangerous connection.
So
Because
in that case, are you
can
saying
have correlation and not have connection.
I
Two
think
separate events can happen and not actually be related to each other,
But they also
still
could be.
correlate. But they could.
Right.
But you can't say that they definitively are unless you can draw the line from A to B.
But so Fauci actually said something about this too, right? He said that the numbers were over-reported or they were not accurate because people that were dying with COVID were not dying from COVID. And initially, everyone who died, basically, like there was all these crazy stories about who like jumped in a lake and snapped their neck and they had COVID and they died.
Right.
But he had actually said that. But then again, I have to say, there's a lot of things that I didn't trust that he said. And I didn't align with some of the things that he said, not because I was like, oh, I know better. It was because there was some shady shit that just made me question it. But you also can't sort of pick and choose, like, well, he said this and I like it, and then he said this thing and I didn't like. You know what I mean? It's like a lot of people were picking and choosing too.
I think the bottom line is it's difficult to
I
determine
mean,
what's
it's worth
fucking
looking
truthful.
into, right? And it's worth looking into, but it's a dangerous thing, and you see it. And again, remove vaccines from the equation, remove pharmacology, remove everything. Take it the direct opposite way to things I used to do research on. Okay, and you see it a lot, and it gets shut down a lot, but it also sneaks through the cracks a lot.
I was gonna
Correlation is a very, very, very dangerous
Yeah, that's a lot of what
comparison.
you're
but that's
saying.
how most science is done, is it not? I
No,
would say so.
no,
So you run
it
a
is
study
not.
with 1,000 people,
Mhm.
and those 1,000 people all come up and have the same side effect. What bullshit scenario, right? Making up a scenario, and what you determine during the study is that they take this vaccine and they all have this side effect, right?
Mhm.
So that's correlation. But that's what you're doing with all things. That's what you're doing
But
with all
that's
science.
so here's the thing. So
Mhm.
here's what you can say. So
I guess causation versus
let's
correlation.
let's
So
That's
that's
let's
correlation.
statistics,
let's
motherfucker.
rewind.
Yeah.
Let's rewind for a second. Okay. This is how a true scientific paper is set up, right? Abstract tells you the gist of what's happening.
Yep.
Introduction, why you're doing what you're doing, methods, what you did, results, everything you found out. Discussion, what your results tell you. Okay. And then conclusion, what you've decided. So take your study. 1,000 people were given vaccine.
Yep.
1,000 people ended up with a third eye.
Yep.
Okay. Unless you can, in your discussion, which involves going to other literature and proving your pathway, that vaccine directly is the reason that they had the third eye. Unless you can draw a pathway there, you can't state in your conclusion that the vaccine gives you a third eye. You can state that it might. You can state that there's reason to believe. You can state that we're going to do more studies into it, but you can't state that it does it. You will
It
never get a
seems
paper.
like it,
You
you
can
could you could
you will never get a paper submitted by saying it does that. Correlation does not. Correlation is horrible in the scientific world.
I think the problem is that our society reads headlines and
Exactly.
and
Exactly.
and
Yes.
and maybe studies say seems like
Exactly.
or
Yes.
and don't say does, and I think that's part of
It goes back to marketing in the 90s and 2000s, and I'll never I was in a behavioral science class and they called it weasel words, right? Words that you're not lying. You're not
okay.
lying when you use it. Nearly 90% of X, things like that. Stuff that you're not lying when you're saying it, but you also aren't telling the whole story. So I'm not discounting it. I would read a paper like that and question, okay, how are you going to prove to me? Like if I were to review that paper, my review of that paper would be, this is fantastic data. You might have something here, but how are you going to prove to me that this is the definitive reason that these people are doing this? Show me that pathway. And if you can't definitively say that it's the cause of it.
So
Question
my
about reviews.
okay, go ahead.
Sorry. Yeah. Because you mentioned that before, and you're going back to that now. Like, because I'm not a scientist, I've not created any papers since I guess that 1 year of mashing up fruit flies.
Biology.
Yeah,
Filimbricus.
such the most boring year of my life. Yeah, yeah. Outside of the class wise, it was, but obviously I love you guys. But reviewing all the data, right? What if somebody makes the math? Like, do you kind of get to pick and choose what you put in the paper? And so long as the maths, the person reviewing this doesn't really question anything.
So here's what normally you're
Does
going to
that make
see
sense?
happens. It does. More times than not, you need to have definitive math to make there's a benchmark. It's not just like, okay, for this study, we got like 60%. So we're good. There's a benchmark. Certain journals won't approve anything that doesn't have 95%. That's just a benchmark. They won't even look at it. They won't even assign reviewers. Not a shot. Okay. So there has to be a benchmark. Normally what happens is you can suss out bad research. You just can. The results are too good to be true. You don't magically just all of a sudden have these things. You have to be pretty skilled to do it, because here's what's going to happen. One of two things. Your paper's either going to get approved, you've sold the lie, but now everybody in your field is out to replicate or prove you wrong, because that's the world it's in. If I want this
Okay.
grant, I'm going to get this grant to prove that you're wrong. So what they're going to do is replicate your study. The minute they replicate your study and get different results, your paper gets called back. And then
Okay.
there's things that turn into lawsuits. Again, the autism guy lost lots and lots of money. I think, again, not sure, but I believe he did some jail time because his data was falsified, and he had conflicts of interest that he did not disclose. That's another big one. Usually you can go back and find, if people are doing this for a reason, money in a pocket, they're going to find the money in the pocket. Will it happen immediately? No. And in the case of the autism vaccine guy, we see it. We see it right now. It's done years and years of damage because people at one point saw that he proved that it happened. And even though everything's been recounted and everything has been pulled back and that he has suffered from it, it's still, people read it once and they believe it.
Are
The
pharma
headlines.
companies putting out papers
Usually a
for their
pharma
studies?
company, usually a pharma company won't put out a paper. Usually a pharma company will fund a research group to do a study, and the research group would put the paper out.
Will they continue to fund the study until the right results are found?
So here's the thing. The pharma company can't fund a study with someone that's connected to the pharma company. That's a financial conflict of interest.
What do you mean? What do you mean?
So let's say, okay, here's a good example. I'll try and do this without names or anything. My old PI was on the board of a company that they had created that did the research we were doing. We could not ever take any money from that company to do research because he had a financial conflict of interest. Now, in the same token, if he were to take the device that he had created and license it, started making money off that device, we could not take money in to do research on that device. It's a financial conflict of interest. Anytime it can be viewed that you are going to sway your results one way based on what someone is giving you, it's a financial conflict of interest. So
they could just continue funding a study until the results they want are found, and they change the variables, right?
Now, the hope is, if they have funded a study in the scientific world, again, I'm speaking on what I would do as a scientist, what a good portion of my cohort would do as scientists. If they funded a study and they didn't get the results they wanted, maybe nothing comes of it, and they do try and go find someone else. The minute someone posts a paper that says it did work, the person who proved that it didn't work is going to go right to work proving that person wrong.
No, I mean, they just change the variables of the study that didn't work.
It's a different study. It's a different study, then it's okay.
Right. But
what
then eventually they find one that works. They put
right,
that data out there. And
but what variables? So what variables are you changing, though? That's the real question.
I don't know. I'm not the virologist.
Right. So think about what real variables are: demographics, age ranges, sex, ethnicity, things like that. So yes, you can do this, but those are going to fall into different subsets. Just because your study didn't work with 35-year-old Black people doesn't mean it could still work with 60-year-old white people, but you're not going to get that 35. You then can't say, well, it also works with 30. That demographic's out. You can't go back and do that again.
In your scientific experience, you would also run a placebo group, right? If for a vaccine or something, right?
So usually on clinical trials of pharmaceuticals, I believe you have to do at least single blind.
Not according to RFK Jr. He said for every vaccine that's ever passed, they've never done a
placebo
group. Yeah,
placebo's double blind. Single blind, I don't believe you need a placebo.
Explain that.
Okay, I'm going to look it up because I want to get it right. I want to get it right.
Single blind versus double blind?
Yes. So in a single blind study, only participants are blinded. In a double blind study, both participants and experiments are blinded. So my guess, so it doesn't actually have to do with the placebo. The scientists know. So I believe, he could be right. Again, I have no proof to say he's not right with the placebo. That being said, I don't know what type of study you could prove without a placebo.
Yeah, it was a weird statement in the Rogan podcast. When you listen to it, let me
So
know what you
a
think.
little bit of my issue with some of the stuff he had to say is, and again, this is me coming from a science side of things again, is instead of saying, read this paper, he goes, read this book by so-and-so. Books are not reviewed like scientific articles are reviewed. So books as a reference, great, and they set you in a mindset, and that's fantastic. But I think they need to be viewed differently than scientific articles are viewed.
But a book could reference all that stuff.
It could, and I'm not saying it didn't. Again, I didn't read the books that he referenced, but that's the issue you run into. If I tell you, read this paper, I know this paper has been rigorously reviewed. That means that I'm going to trust that more than saying, read this book where this author gives their opinion on it.
Right, but I feel like a book could probably be a good source of aggregation of a bunch of studies, right? Maybe not. I'm speaking in general here. Particular books. I don't really know. But I'm sure there are studies going both directions on a lot of vaccines and a lot of drugs, right? And in a place to review different studies and then come up with an opinion. I feel like that's what
and that's fine
does.
as long as you are disclosing that it is an opinion and not just spouting, read this and you'll understand where I'm coming from. A lot of the times, these people who put mics in front of their face, and again, it goes both ways. It goes on the yay side, it goes on the nay side. So I don't want to sound like I'm speaking one-sided on it. A lot of times, as soon as someone sees a microphone in someone's face, they're going to assume that that person has done all the rigorous research, and so what they're saying is gold. So if that person doesn't say, it's my opinion, people are going to read it as fact, and that's dangerous. It's dangerous on both sides.
So the one I don't know if you guys are familiar enough with it, but when they tried to censor Rogan, do you know like the whole story there is? And I guess that bothers me and makes me trust a little less in the powers that be, right?
I think the big problem with the censorship of Rogan is Rogan doesn't really he welcomes debates. I have seen it. Now, we have yet to see one, which means you have to raise a couple flags there if he's welcoming debates for things that he puts people on and then none ever happen, right?
Just seems like no one wants to.
Right. But my big issue with Rogan is the man has, what'd you say, Rich? 40 million people see his show?
That's the number that RFK Jr. mentioned in this last episode.
Yeah. Does he ever put a disclaimer out there that these are the opinions of so-and-so? This is not fodder. This is, these are Roganites. These are people who are going to follow the law of what he says. I mean, you saw it. You saw it. Again, this is a claim that the scientist made. So again, it's his word versus that. But he said that he had people who listened to Joe Rogan's podcast stalking him after the podcast. Like, does Joe Rogan then come out and say, guys, don't do that, stop being idiots? No.
Wasn't the whole thing with Rogan though, like there was a claim made by CNN saying he said to take one thing when he had Dr.
Ivermectin. Yeah, that was my next topic. But
right,
yeah.
and then what was it, Dr. Sanjay Gupta? And Sanjay had said no, that's not true. And then CNN just refused to make an apology either way. So I think like was his reputation dragged through the mud a little bit because of that whole thing. The other thing is I'm laughing because I'm trying to do research on, you keep mentioning RFK Jr. Because I think you're going back to this podcast and he's talking quite a bit about, I guess I'm assuming the vaccine. I didn't listen to it yet.
He's a big anti-vax guy and gets canceled because of it.
Well, so I'm he's actually, if I could just interject for a minute, the more I read the notes on it, I mean, he would be considered an anti-vaxxer, and he has dropped the argument of things like the autism claim and things like that.
Right.
But I think more in 2023's realm, he's anti-big pharma. I
right.
don't think he's
that's why I went anti-vax because he's not really.
Well, so here's the thing. I'm like, well, what is this guy's background? Like, he's
an environmental lawyer
cleaning up the Hudson River.
He's an environmental lawyer.
So he's a lawyer. But then if you go on Wiki, right, or if you just type in what is RFK Jr.'s background, right, first thing that comes up, Robert Francis Kennedy Jr. is an American environmental lawyer, politician, and writer who has promoted anti-vaccine propaganda and health-related conspiracy theories.
Well,
that's exactly
okay,
that's what I'm saying.
So let's stop for a second.
Why is it propaganda?
So Rich, this is not meant to be a jab or a joke or anything, but what you just did is the reason we have issues with people believing and understanding things. Your source is Wikipedia.
No, I'm not
It's just
saying
the first thing that comes up. I see,
which is fine.
I'm just saying
No,
if
I
you
understand
Google
what you're saying, but that right there is a microcosm of what happens when people use Dr. Google or virologist Google or things like that. Is you are dictated by things that are created by people.
Well, I
That's
think
why
you
you
and I are
need
making
to
the same
read
point, though.
actual things. No, and we are, but I'm
Yeah,
trying
but-
to say that like that is case in point why I'm saying people need to educate, read
Yeah.
scientific articles. Don't read CNN, Fox News, all these other things. You need to read the actual facts. And if you read the actual facts, a lot of the things from both sides would become a lot more clear.
no one's ever
But
going to do that.
Well, it's
exactly.
People are going to
that's
watch
the problem.
CNN. People
Yeah,
are going
no
to
one's
watch
gonna-
NBC.
Yeah, I agreed there. I think that the funny thing is, it's like if you look at it from a headline, right? You Google what his background is, you might 9 out of 10 people, however many, you might look at that and say, "Oh, this guy's just spreads
I mean,
propaganda. He's an anti-vaxxer."
sadly, the
lunatic."
only word I don't agree with in that it would be the propaganda one, and because
And how the fuck does that get up there?
I mean, but here's the problem though. So remember, prior to 2020, prior to COVID, if you look back to it, he has referenced and he has remarked on vaccines causing autism, which has been proven to not be true. So if you're pushing that rhetoric, technically that's anti-vax propaganda.
I wouldn't say it's been proven enough to the point where he doesn't believe it's true. So it's clearly not. I wouldn't say it's proven.
Again, I think
if people still believe it, is it proven?
If you pulled 50 scientific articles, probably 48 of them would definitively say that vaccines do not cause autism.
And that's where I'd go. Are they funded by big pharma? Are they, are the government pushing an agenda? I don't know.
I mean, I could do it. It would take me a week or so, but I could do it. I'll do it.
Let me ask you this, right? Growing up in America, obviously you were raised to believe certain things.
But anyway, before you do that, Rich, before you do that, the other word you used was conspiracy theorist, and he absolutely is. He literally just spent time on Rogan talking about how the CIA is going to kill him. So, conspiracy theorist.
He might not be fucking wrong though. He might this guy's rocking the boat right now.
Conspiracy theorist.
Bro, he was talking about his uncle. He was talking about his uncle, and his uncle, after they lost 75 troops in Vietnam, they lost 75 Green Berets or something. He's like, we're getting them all out of there. We're fucking getting them all out of there. And I'm disbanding the CIA. A month later, he's fucking assassinated. I mean, I think correlation, but bro,
so here's the thing. Here's the thing. Conspiracy theories are really fun. They are. Everybody chats about them. They're fun. I mean, it's baseless claims without facts, right? Well, just because you say something didn't happen, that like unless you it goes both ways. You sit here and say, can you prove definitively that this is the case? Conspiracy theories throw things out there all the time that they can't prove is the case. So why are we listening to that? So
I get what you're saying. I personally, I don't think. Well, I'm
again super fun. I like to play conspiracy theory. My conspiracy theory is that the FBI actually killed JFK because JFK was super anti-organized crime, and Hoover wanted to keep organized crime going because they had a picture of him in a dress. That's my theory on JFK.
I love this because
that's my theory.
The other day I said, when you brought this up about the whole conspiracy theory that he has, I said, Seth, who killed JFK? You basically called me crazy in the group chat, but now you just have a different conspiracy than I do.
Because in the group chat, I was trying to have a real person conversation. And today I literally just said, if we're having the fun of conspiracy theories in the real realm of thing, I can't prove it. So I can't say it's a real thing, but this is why. So this is why, and I want to get to Tyler's point in a second here, because he brought up the I word that I really, really want to talk about. Because I did. Yes. Because I did a bunch of research on that today. So this is why, though, a lot of times people will turn down debates with conspiracy theorists, because conspiracy theorists are able to say whatever the fuck they want. They need no proof. They need nothing. They can just spout out whatever they want. So if you're debating them, you're putting them on this higher level because you're giving them the spotlight and giving them the chance to spout this rhetoric of conspiracy theory without having to Meanwhile, they're like, well, why can't you prove that this happened? But it's the same thing.
It's a politician. That sounds like a politician. Well, let me ask you this, right? Just real quick. Do you believe that in the United States of America there is censorship?
Absolutely.
Okay. Do you, Tyler?
Obviously.
Yeah, I did too. I had a friend who thought that was absurd. I also had a friend that thought like no one ever gets like assassinated or killed or anything like that. But I was just curious.
Yeah, wet work in the 60s was never a thing. Wet work in 2023, definitely.
Bro, the Twitter files.
The Twitter files.
Dude, that is. Did you read that thing?
That's a whole episode. We got to do a whole episode on it.
I would have to read them all again.
Cut that. I was gonna say cut that. We got to do that as its own episode. Yeah.
No, but I'm saying that Do you disagree that that's proof of censorship, Seth?
Oh, it is. I just said
Okay.
that there's censorship.
That's what I'm saying. I don't know why you're saying cut it then, because
But again, you also no,
He
I'm
means
saying
like
cut
save
it.
it for another.
I mean,
Oh
save
yeah,
it for yeah.
okay.
But no, I think that the big problem is though that now becomes an excuse. Like, oh, so this only worked because of censorship. Do you have proof that it was? That's my thing on
No,
it
but
is,
people have to question now. Now everything is coming into question.
and that's
Everything. I
Everything.
question
okay.
everything,
And
which
that's okay.
sucks because I just don't know.
But
It's
when
good
you
to
get
question, but
when you get the answer to the question, you need to move on. And rational people like yourself and me and Rizzy, we move on. Irrational people will not move on. They'll say there's another liar, there's another this, or there's another
yeah,
that.
yeah.
That's the big problem. Again, I'm a scientist. That is literally my job, is to question things. But when I get an answer, a well vetted, well proven, well documented answer, I move on
So
because it
the
was given to
assassination of
me.
JFK is well documented, well proven.
I mean, I'm pretty sure they declassified the documents on it. Did
Who
they not?
declassified it? The organization that they're saying might have killed him. All I'm
Okay, we
saying.
can go
Okay,
back. We can
CIA.
go back to the conspiracy
Mythbusters
theory.
didn't
we
Mythbusters did that whole like shooting thing.
we can go back to the conspiracy theory. Sorry, but anyway, let's move on. Let's move on.
Go to
Let's
ivermectin. I want to hear your.
yes.
How can
So
I
I want
say
to hear
Mythbusters?
your because you said you had a point on it first.
It
So
was
I
more
want
of
to
a
hear your point.
conversation. I
Yes.
was having some conversation points. So Rogan's scenario, right, was that he, from what I remember him saying, was that he had COVID and he took ivermectin, and I don't remember who recommended it to him or why he took it. And
Wait, who? Sorry, who took this? Jamie
no, Rogan.
Rogan. Okay, Jamie's his. Did you say Jamie?
No.
No.
I don't know how the hell. So I was reading something and then okay,
And so
go ahead.
he
Sorry.
took it, and whether his symptoms got better because of it, he wasn't sure, or maybe he says it might have helped. But he felt bad for a day and then had to go and cancel his show with I forget who that weekend. And then that's when CNN took the photos of him and like made one yellow and said the ivermectin was like fucking him up and he's taking horse tranquilizer or something. When ivermectin is approved for other human uses, not for COVID-19.
I was gonna say it is not it is approved for human use. It is not approved for human use for COVID-19.
But part of the reason why it may not be approved for COVID-19 is, and I don't know if you've looked into this, is that to pass the COVID vaccine, they needed to get the emergency use authorization, right? And the only way you can
I
get
know
that,
right where you're going with this.
the
Is
only way
if
you can get that,
ivermectin's out there. Yep.
no, yeah, right. The only way you can get that is if there's not another potential solution, right? Another potential drug that works. And so potentially maybe they're shooting down ivermectin just so Big Pharma can pass fucking COVID
So
vaccine.
do you know how long actual FDA approval takes? Like
I
actual,
don't
not
know.
emergency,
I don't know.
actual, no less than 2 years.
Okay.
No less than 2 years from start to finish. You need to go through, I believe, 3. And again, this is my memory of when we were trying to get into clinical during my PhD. It is not correct, but last I knew, I believe it is roughly 2 years and roughly 3 sets of clinical trials. So
Okay.
the sheer fact that they're saying we want emergency use on one, so we're not just going to slap an FDA approval on the other, is ridiculous, because that would mean that ivermectin had gone through all those clinical trials. So those should be in the public domain, that they are out there. And if they are not, then they didn't go through them and they were still 2 years away from it anyway.
It was it was already approved for human use, right?
But not for COVID-19.
But
so you have to do
a
2
new
years
vaccine
of
is going to
clinical
make pharma a
trials.
lot of fucking money, where an ivermectin is not.
Yeah,
Let's time out for a second.
Testing period be like what?
Let's time out for a second. Let's time out for a second. Okay. You're never going to emergency approve something that's not like an ivermectin over. It's just not going to happen, right?
Wow.
So we discredit it immediately.
It's not just it. So here's the other thing. It's not discredited. It's not. That's the big problem, is people are going, oh my
CNN
God.
put out propaganda on it.
You guys
Literal propaganda.
But what did you guys just say about 20 minutes ago? We don't listen to news, right? We all need to do our independent research.
May not.
Right.
But 99% of the population does. And
the hysteria over
I'm
the
agreeing
Trump
with
years,
you.
the hysteria now, it's all everyone believes.
Listen, I am agreeing with you. I have been spilling this whole time that people need to do their own research, but unfortunately, people's research is www.google.com and not looking at scientific articles. And again, I state to you that ivermectin, that base right there is one of those dangerous statements that ivermectin didn't get approved because COVID-19, the vaccine needed emergency approval. That there's no way that that's true. There's no way that they're going to sit here and say, yeah, we're going to withhold. We actually have everything lined up. It's just a stamp of approval on this one thing, but we're going to hold it up so we can do this whole other. There's no way that happens.
Well, why wouldn't they do trials with ivermectin though? It was already approved in human use. Why wouldn't they start trials
So
for using that for COVID?
I'm going to assume they're doing trials right now, but we're talking COVID's only been around for 3 years. If you don't have the funding or you miss deadlines or any of those type of things, you're going to have to restart.
So
It's a long and arduous process.
Developing a vaccine is cheaper than using a drug that's already in the market and approved for human use in smaller doses.
Clinical trials, though, think of how much cost a clinical trial falls into.
Bro, I'm just saying, I don't have enough faith at this point in my life that Big Pharma didn't have a play in that.
I'm not again, I don't have the proof to say they did. I don't have the proof.
I don't have the proof to say they did either.
Right.
I don't have the proof to say.
What I'm saying is it's dangerous when someone comes out with a claim that that's the reason, right? Because now you've got people who are uneducated on ivermectin, who can go get ivermectin, who are taking it wrongly and taking too much of it and causing harm to themselves. Whereas a COVID vaccine is administered by a medical professional. So even though it might be Big Pharma pushing it, and even though there might be this conspiracy theory that it was done so the other one wasn't done, people aren't misusing it. People are going to misuse something they can put on themselves. That's why it's more difficult.
Is ivermectin something you can put on yourself? I don't know.
Yeah, it's a topical, and then I believe it's a topical and a pill.
Spread on your balls, and
it's not prescribed.
It's I believe it's prescription based, but you still are the one who does it. Your doctor doesn't put it on you. A COVID shot was administered to you by a medical professional.
You could also go take 10 COVID shots.
You could like capsule. You could put it in a capsule. Not capsules for
I don't know how many COVID shots you got. I did a lot of paperwork for each of mine, so I don't think.
Bro, I walked into a CVS. They handed me a card and stamped that fucker, and I walked out. That's it. I could go to a different CVS or a different Walgreens and do the same shit.
Well, let me ask. I guess here's how I'd want to ask it, right? Because I'm still trying to make sense of this. If they were to say, "Hey, look, you have two options, right? We have to put one drug through clinical trials for 4 months before we determine if we're going to roll this out at a massive scale." You've got this ivermectin, or I don't even say it. You've got one drug who is approved for human use. Would you want to put that? Wait, let me finish. Wait, let me finish.
I just don't like how you worded that, but continue.
You've got this one drug who, whatever the scale is, we know that people have used it. It's been approved for human use. Okay, we can put that through a 4-month clinical trial, or we have this new drug that will put through a 4-month clinical trial that's not been in a person's body at all to this point. Wouldn't you in your head go, I think I would rather start with the one that's at least approved for human use?
Okay, so let's rewind for a few seconds. One, new drug. You just told us that the technology of mRNA has been around for years.
No,
so
the technology has been. The vaccine is a whole new virus, though. This is a whole new virus.
But it's still, but the technology is there.
Technology is there, but it's a new vaccine. They had to develop a new vaccine.
Then you said something that's FDA approved, but you didn't put your quantifier on it. Okay, you know what else is FDA approved?
I don't know.
Do you know what else is FDA approved? Fentanyl for pain meds.
Yeah,
do you know what people die of all the time? Fentanyl, because it's misused, because it's self-administered.
So the funny thing is,
there's a self-administration factor that worries people. That's why it's harder for something that would be over the counter or even prescribed, but self-administered. That's why it's going to be more rigorous to get that, because you yourself, Joe Schmo, is administering it. So you yourself are more of a risk to misuse it.
Instead of giving me a big tube of ivermectin, you could.
So are you going to go to the doctor every single? Are you going to go to the doctor every single day and get an ivermectin pill?
It would be like you're this height, this weight, whatever, however you quantify it, right?
Yes,
and we're going to put it in like a little capsule that measures it out.
I forgot. People that get Vicodin really take their prescribed doses daily. I forgot about that.
You also have
to. There you go, dude.
The fact that, I mean,
your argument is based on 3% of the population.
But here's what I'm saying.
Using it.
So let's think about Joe Schmo. So we're in the time of COVID, right? You're not allowed to do anything at all if you have COVID. You basically have to be a troll in your basement, right? That's where we can all agree on that.
I was working 7 days a week, so I don't.
When you were sick, if you were diagnosed with COVID, you were forced to be a troll in your basement, right?
Yes.
Got, I don't know, big wedding coming up. You really want to go to. You booked your hotel room. Yeah. The doctor gave me and said, take one ivermectin a day. But hey, what if I take all 7 in one day? Then what happens? Maybe I'll get cured quicker. And then you die.
You're talking random scenarios, bro. You can't base your argument on something that probably happens in 5% of people. You know, Most people aren't dumbasses like that.
Here's the thing. But here's the thing. This is the rationale that the FDA is using. That's what they're saying.
How often do you take more Advil than you're supposed to?
I would say if you were to poll again, my opinion, but if
Making
you were
up
to poll
facts.
the national, my opinion.
It's not an opinion. You're trying to make a statistic up.
No, my guess. I won't say opinion. My guess would be over 50% of people who regularly take Tylenol miss dose.
Oh, this isn't a regular scenario. This is trying to treat a disease that you have right now.
Let's do this. I'm gonna Google something real fast.
You get the flu. How are you overtaking the flu medication you're taking? No, you're taking.
Dude, I always do 1.5 for NyQuil. I'm not gonna lie.
Case in point, right there.
Rich
Case in point, right there.
I'm sorry, but I'm like probably one of the 5%. Because I just feel like the actual dosage doesn't dry me out, doesn't make me sleep, but like a little extra, a little heavier pour puts me out.
All right, I gotta go, guys. I gotta get out of this conversation.
But here's the thing, though, right? NyQuil, I'm sure that probably fucks up your liver too. But like, if we're talking about like a viral medication or a heart medication or a diabetes medication, no fucking way would I overdo it. No way. Yeah. Something like that's going to dry me up a little bit, make me sleep a little bit harder. I mean, it's probably not even 1.5, but I make sure I make sure I don't have that like little residual at the bottom and I'm like missing that.
So again, and this again, I know it sounds like this is me saying this, but this is the eyes of the people who their stamp of approval means, again, it goes to the negative side, but it's billions of dollars we're talking about. You put that stamp on there and it's wrong. Again, it's not a vaccine at this point. It's a medication that's not a vaccine. So you put that stamp on it and it's wrong. You get sued for billions of dollars.
But your reasoning here isn't what the FDA, or at least not what I'm reading, the FDA is urging people to stop doing.
Well, I think he's right. I think he's right, though, in the sense that
the FDA was urging people to stop using the animal version of ivermectin to treat COVID-19.
Well, because the animal one is over
the horse D one or whatever.
Yeah, right.
The animal one is over the counter, and the human one is prescribed.
Right.
So that's why they were telling people not to use the animal one, because it's the one they could get their hands on.
Okay, again, they were urging people not to use the animal one, but why weren't they fucking looking into the people one? It just.
I mean, they were.
Me.
They were. I'm assuming again. They could, maybe they weren't, but you can't say. Can you say that they weren't?
CNN ran a smear campaign on Rogan, fucking throwing a yellow filter on him. Obviously, the powers that be did not want ivermectin to go through.
The powers that be.
The CNN is 100% an extension of a political party.
And all the Pfizer commercials there too. You know.
The media is an extension of politics, like of political parties for sure. And I'm not going to say one like they both have their own extensions, but. I will say, Seth, I do agree with Seth, right? And I make light of like when I'm like whenever I have the flu, maybe I'll take like a little bit extra NyQuil. I'm not taking like 2 shots, just to be clear, but like like a little extra. I would say, here's the thing though, to Seth's point, right? People, I think we're like the 3 of us would use our heads when it comes to serious medication stuff like that. But when you look at people that break their leg or have some sort of knee surgery, right? If you look at the opioid epidemic, you look at people abusing painkillers all the time. Like this happens all the time, people abusing drugs. Dude, if you go to college campuses, even after college, people were like snorting fucking what's that drug that Adderall. And people are selling it off, like giving it to friends without any prescription. So it definitely gets abused.
You're right, Tyler. It is a small percentage, but when you use the word death, a small percentage to anybody is that much more blown up. You can't have that on your hands if you can mitigate it.
So the best solution is to rush a vaccine that we don't know the long term.
Yeah, I align with what you're saying. I don't agree with like rushing a vaccine, but again,
I mean, I don't think either was
that's
the right answer.
Best solution. I don't know.
Well, again, now you got to rewind though. You got to rewind. We're in a time of crisis. We're trying to get an answer. You're trying to figure things out. So what are you going to do? Sit there and do the studies on both of them and try and figure it out and make Americans. I mean, we could have still been sitting where we were in April of 2020 right now if we had gone through all the proper channels.
So my question there would be, how bad was is COVID really? You know,
well, ask all the people that were on ventilators and died. I think they're going to say it's pretty bad
for your average person. For people without underlying conditions who weren't 90 years old, who weren't fat as shit,
obese, dude. That's the question.
How many people have died of COVID?
I don't know.
Well, do you think it was worse in the US because we have a lot more underlying health issues than European counterparts or other
I
people?
think it
Well,
was
look at
worse in
obesity
the
in this country. And
I think it was worse in the US because it was so politicized in the US and it became
well,
you are this side or that side. And so if you're one side versus the other, you're going to do everything or nothing. There is no middle ground.
but
Do
you
you
don't think
guys?
like our hypertension rates, our anxiety, or like hypertension,
They
heart disease,
are,
diabetes,
but I
obesity,
guarantee you that you're
compared to
going to
other
find
countries
cases of
where
people who died from COVID who did not have underlying conditions.
I'm sure there's plenty of
Yes,
people who did,
but
but I'm
what
saying
was the
like
real risk?
we need to see the actual data because, and this was here's the thing though, this was
But
something
also
that
you
was
got to
frowned
remember, so
upon
you
if you
talked
wanted to
about,
talk about it because you're not
but
allowed
you
to call
It
remember,
people
was.
obese anymore.
but you
That's
remember,
now a bad word.
yes, I agree. Heart disease, respiratory issues, obesity, but you also have to think about there are a lot of people out there who are immunocompromised that's not their fault at all.
Agreed.
Rheumatoid arthritis, anybody who's doing any type of chemo, all these people who have any type
Mhm.
of autoimmune disease, it's not their fault. So you're saying we're just going to pull the brakes back and wait and figure it out and let those people die off because they
Not what
have
I
no
said.
defense?
Well,
Not what I said.
no, not
I know it's
necessarily,
not.
but
I know it's not what you said, Tyler. I know it's not what you said.
That you
so
said,
I
you
don't want
just
to make
said
it
that's what
sound
I
like you
said.
said.
not necessarily, but this is such a complex issue, to be quite honest. It's not black and white like every other issue, right?
I think
It's
the
not black
big
and white, but
problem that happens is very early on, you got COVID and it was like a black stamp. Like remember really early on, they were literally telling the people who got COVID, Joe Schmo in this area code got COVID. And then it got too big and they
yes, I
couldn't
do
follow it
remember that.
anymore.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, yeah.
It
And
didn't
so
happen
it
in
got to
Georgia.
this point.
That didn't happen in
And so,
Georgia.
well, I mean, you're in Georgia. That doesn't
Yeah,
surprise me.
bro, they like refused to believe in COVID until Fourth of
Um,
July.
so
Did they get
there's
names
this
though, or did they just
black.
say like this one person, like this
I
like
mean, up
male of
until
this?
in the state of New York, up until I think they hit the 50 or 70 death toll, they were naming the people. And
Okay,
then even then, when I was in central New York, they were still listing them in that area.
okay,
But again, just getting COVID, right? It was a blacklist. Oh, guys, I got COVID. Ho
yeah.
ho, were you not wearing a mask? Were you not doing, like it's a bad list. Look, COVID's going to happen. The flu's going to happen. All these things
Yeah.
that we have protective sides against are going to happen. The
Hmm.
big thing that these vaccines should have done, and it got lost in the shuffle because it was pushed too forward and then all this other stuff came up. You're going to catch COVID. You're going to catch the flu, even if you have these vaccines. The big important thing is you're not getting a tube stuffed down your throat because you have COVID. Not only that, though, you're not showing other symptoms. So you're not coughing and then, granny
Hmm.
over here who's 95 is going to die from it. Okay. So it's not so much the stopping the getting it, it's the stopping the spread of it.
Yeah,
And
I get
that's
I
what
get that.
vaccines do.
That's part of the change in narrative that happened.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's part of the problem is that at first it was we're gonna cure everybody. And then it wasn't that. Now, I can tell you right now, again, without spelling too much out there, my wife is in the medical field. So she has more of an upfront view of all of this. And she even said, and we had discussions early on that that's not necessarily what vaccines do. They don't stop you from getting it. The flu vaccine shit. You know how they determine how to make a flu vaccine each year? They look at the states at the stats of last year's flu, and like the 5 most common flu strains from the last year is what they put the flu shot for the next year. That's how that happens. But the idea behind it is there's enough of the base flu that's the same that you might catch a flu strain, but you're not going to end up in the hospital. You're not going to be sneezing on granny who's then going to end up dying, things like that.
But so the strains they put in there don't prevent you from getting that strain.
So no,
Don't prevent you from the new
they
strain.
always put flu A and flu, again, memory at this point, not true.
Yeah.
I believe they always put flu A and flu B in there every year.
What do you mean?
There are so many different strains of influenza out there now because it's
So
mutated.
yeah.
Remember,
You're
guys,
safe from last year's strain, but not this year's strain.
vaccines,
But
diseases are living things. So COVID-19 is a living thing, right?
yeah, they mutate.
Right. That's what they do to survive, right? So in doing so, to do that, you end up making more of yourself. You end up mutating. You also make yourself more transmittable, but weaker. Okay. Because you want to make more of you. Doesn't necessarily, but to make more of you, you can't make you as strong, right? That's science on a biology level. Is for a cells divide, they're not as strong, but there's more of them, right?
But so the flu vaccine,
Mhm.
the flu vaccine you get based on last year's strain,
Mhm.
you could still catch last year's strain.
No,
Okay,
not to my knowledge.
Okay, so that's different
but it
than
doesn't
Is
prevent
that because
the
it's like
flu.
a dead virus vaccine versus an
Correct.
mRNA?
okay.
Okay.
Correct. But again, it's not even the idea of catching the actual strain. It's mitigating your symptoms to survive it. Right.
So we're 3 years later,
Mhm.
right? At this point, like this is sort of my opinion, where it's 3 years later, to your point, every time it divides and it multiplies and mutates, it gets weaker and weaker and weaker. I've had COVID before. I've had it twice, actually. I've had it when I was not boosted, and frankly, it was easier this go around than when I got boosted. But like at this point, it's like, well, why would I bother getting
So if you
the
should get any
vaccine
of
if
it,
it's
in all
supposed to be
honesty,
weaker
if
now?
you should get any of them, you should get the bivalent, because the bivalent has the broadest
I don't even know what is
coverage.
that?
It covers, and I could be wrong in saying it, so I'm going to look it up.
They probably don't have enough money to put out the commercials on CNN for it, so you might not have heard of
It sounds
it.
like you watch too much CNN, man. You just
Yeah.
got to cut the
I
cord
actually
like
don't
I
watch it.
do.
I don't watch any news.
Yeah, I don't really either.
I honestly, what came out of all this for me is just a general distrust in any information that I'd see.
Well, I think here's the big thing, right? Which is like, um,
So
rightfully so. Oh yeah, bivalent.
So the bivalent strain has two mRNA components, one from the original and then one from the variants. So all of the boosters were just original. You basically were just stacking your antibodies of the original. The bivalent has the original and then from the strains.
Okay.
So we just finished up Colin's run of COVID shots, and I got more COVID shots in my life than he has, and he's done getting them because he got two originals, one and then a booster because they can't give the full dose to a child. So he got the equivalent of one adult dose and the bivalent, and that's it.
I mixed, which
I
is like we'll see
100
what
I
happens in 10 years.
150% will tell you right off the bat that I don't think we needed nearly as many COVID shots as they gave us. Not even close. Not even close.
Did they run studies on kids?
They have. Yeah, they had to before they
I
could
thought
give
they
them to
didn't.
them. They have now.
Didn't.
No, they have.
I thought they didn't before they gave it to them, though.
So that was the.
I don't know.
Right? Because
I'm more
they
asking.
I think they did because they called it back.
They did. So they
Is either that or pregnant women that they didn't test before actually running it out, right?
I believe it was pregnant women because kids they were super stringent with kids because kids couldn't get it for, and then they tapered down. It was 18 and then 12.
They started with the elderly, right, and then worked their way.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Let's see if I can even. I should say I said they called it back. I what I meant to say was I thought there was a point in time where they're like it's not ready for kids yet, so they kind of halted it. Wait, so I think
there was a not super backed claim originally that it caused, maybe it was Guillain-Barré, some disease in children, and then it was very quickly proven that that is not the case at all. Okay. And so they continued the process with it. But that was the holdup, was there was this claim. And again, this is actually a time where you saw it, the process working in the way it was supposed to. So to the general public, it was being dispersed. Okay. You're finally getting yourself your FDA approval. You're starting to move down, but you're doing more and more studies before you move down. Someone comes out and claims it causes disease A in children. Instead of just discrediting that and continue, they halted everything, went and looked, proved that it was wrong, and then continued to give it to kids.
You know, I think when we talk about like the whole Joe Rogan thing and the conspiracies behind it, you know, what's interesting is a lot of the things that were conspiracies or crazy in the beginning, we're now starting to see weren't so crazy. And I think when we talk about smear campaigns, like for example, do you remember when first off, saying that it came from a lab was like you couldn't say that was ridiculous.
I knew he was going to dive into this tonight. I knew he was going to.
I don't think we need to dive in, but do you remember when Jon Stewart was on Colbert and he had said that I think Colbert was so uncomfortable. I mean, did you see this when he was on Colbert?
I did not.
You need to watch it, man. Colbert was so uncomfortable, and Jon Stewart was basically saying, like, yeah, Colbert said, yeah, there's a chance that it maybe came from the lab in China, but like, you know, there's no facts. And then Jon Stewart's like, a chance. He's like, there's literally the Wuhan like lab for whatever. Like, he's like, that would be like saying there was a an outbreak of chocolatey goodness in Hershey, Pennsylvania. And, like, people are saying it's for like other reasons besides the fact that, yeah, dude, I love the fact that Colbert got so uncomfortable, because I do think it's very clear there were, depending on it just, like we said, it was so political. The media is an extension of political parties. Late night TV show hosts certainly are swayed by politics. It's all about politics. I mean, there's a lot of people that just made a living just making, claims about Trump for 4 years, right? And that's all they did. And so there was so much hysteria behind it. And I think maybe one of the good things, I think there's positives and negatives. I think the positive is the fact that people are asking themselves a lot more questions. Me, I grew up extremely patriotic, never questioned anything, supported a lot of things that we did that frankly we probably shouldn't have done. And I'm saying that now. The last, man, I would say the last 10, 12 years, I started to question some stuff. The last 3 years especially, I think, I don't know if they're just getting sloppy or what, but it's like now it's like my eyes are really starting to open, and I'm like, you know what? There's so many contradictions. There's so many smear campaigns going on. It's clear that there's special interests and that this is all connected. Like you have to be blind not to see it.
Can I ask you a question?
I'm 100%
Hang
in
on,
the same
hang
boat
on,
as you,
hang on.
Rich.
I just,
Here's
okay,
the thing.
continue.
Here's the thing though. But the negative is that this was just another wedge between a lot of Americans. And so when something is true, right, factually true, a lot of people will never believe it, because it's either just doesn't go along with their politics, or they just have so much doubt in so many things that you can say, hey, the sky's blue, and they're like, well, that's because there's some projection behind CNN studio, and they're throwing that up into the sky. Or Fox, right? Fox is like the big evil wolf and all that. Like, people will always have some sort of opinion based on that bullshit. And so it's that, for that reason too, it is a little bit dangerous.
So then how do you ever believe anything
Mexican
at all?
standard.
So that's my question. Do you ever believe anything at all?
No, I do.
Because
but
the only reason I ask is because, like, you mentioned the last 3 years, but let's broaden it. I think we can say 10. I know that you have a strong feeling about a certain 4 years in there, but there's now a lot of questions being raised about those 4 years. Are you going to continue to,
I'd say I question everything a lot more.
I think I question a lot of stuff during that time.
My biggest issue is people stand behind certain things, right? And they always goes, there's no claim that this happened. There's no claim that this was the case. And then the claim is put in their face. Documents are done.
By who? That's the fucking problem, though. The problem is who's putting out the information. If it's a source that could be censored or could be manipulated by money, that's where the fucking questions start getting asked.
I feel like the criminal court system is.
That's where my mind's gone over the last 3 years, right? That we talk about like things like,
so is it just COVID? So is it just COVID that has caused you to think this?
War in Ukraine, another one. I think there's so much shit that is influenced by big companies and lobbyists and the government not having.
But that's been more than the last 3 years.
I've only opened my eyes in the last 3 years.
Yeah, but that's just it. Lobbyists have been around for what, 30 years?
Yeah,
more than.
Oh wait, I mean, they've been around since the beginning of the country.
But I think the speed of information has changed over the last.
Well, that's because everything's at our fingertips, and I think that's part of why there's such. It's both ways. There's such distrust, but there was also such this push to get things out, get the number. Who wasn't glued to their phone in March of 2020, finding out how many people died each day from COVID? Okay, well, some of us weren't allowed to work because we lived in communist New York. Okay. But like, you know what I mean? Like it was here it is. It's right here on your cell phone, right? And so this readiness for information, but also, again, we talk about it, censorship. So censorship goes both ways. There's censorship that's dangerous. Yeah. It covers things that could be true. But at the same time, there are things that people can say with baseless claims and it goes out there, right? So my worry is that, we just don't, you ask the questions and that's fine, but you need to look at the right spot for answers.
Right. But nobody does that.
Exactly. Oh, I agree. I agree 100%.
And so the only way to find those right sources of information are sources that aren't censored, right? They're not mainstream media, right? Because there's high potential that could be influenced by money.
as long as you're doing the same questioning of the uncensored that you are of the supposed censored.
I think I question everything now.
I think my biggest worry is that, look, at the end of the day, I think we can all say it. 2008 to 2016 wasn't as perfect as people want it to be. Actually, one thing I really wanted to touch on, and then we just moved way far away from it, and we should talk about it, is Obamacare. That was one of the first things I think we saw that was rushed out way too fast. It's a fantastic idea, but it was one of those things where they were like, we need this now, and so then they rushed it out, and it flopped.
It's
and
not
it
even affordable, by
flopped
the way.
hard. It is now. It's much
What is it
better
now?
now. I don't know the numbers off the
'cause
top of
like
my
a
head, but
few
I know
years
that
ago when
it is much better now than it was. The worst thing that ever came of that was when they decided that they were going to penalize you if you didn't have health
in the
insurance.
very beginning, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, that was.
Yeah,
But
I think our government's been fucking up forever, and lobbyists have been paying money, and people have been making money forever. It's just now that information is getting out to the people more often.
Well, yeah, I think that's part of it, but I think they're getting sloppy in a lot of ways. Like I said, I'm not saying because Biden's the president, I question more things, right? I don't think it has anything to do with Biden specifically, but I will say I just think the last 3 years, to me, there's been so many stories, there's been so many just people dropping the ball, just sloppy. Like it's like the Wizard of Oz. There is a man behind the curtain, right? It's smoke and mirrors. Like we know this now. The beauty about Trump, whether you love Trump or hate him, the thing about those 4 years, right, that I think was, look, there's a lot of good things, there's a lot of bad things, right? People will crucify me for saying either way. But when that guy was running and when he was in office, it became so obvious to me that there was a political machine behind that was married to the media. And you want to talk about propaganda? I mean, people literally thought the sky was falling every single goddamn day.
Yeah.
It was just,
I'll
it
agree
was
with that.
absurd.
But the
It was
counterpoint to that is,
pathetic.
isn't that who he was as a president? He was married to corporations. He was married to people who were giving
Oh, he's a
money.
businessman. Yeah. Dude, they all
So
are.
what makes him any
infallible
better?
by any.
So what
No, you're
makes him
right.
any
That's
better?
well, yeah. That's
And agree. So I see where you're coming from, where he opened the eyes of that.
Yeah, like
But
we needed him in a way.
his loyalists will be like, and that's why he needs another. No, that motherfucker does
Well, no,
not need another term in office. He
he's
doesn't
got
need to be
he's got
anywhere
too much
near any
baggage.
more power.
He's got too much baggage, but that's because the media control. People allow the media to control them, and a lot of the baggage that he has was again just people were coming up with stuff
I
from
think,
fucking
and
30
I
years
agree,
ago. It's just,
but he's not the first president who was crucified by one side versus
no,
the
well,
other.
100%.
It was way worse.
I mean,
though.
Slick Willie got away with a lot
Dude,
because
it goes all the way
because
back
Hillary took care of everything.
But Trump was way worse just because of, again, the speed of information. And
absolutely, 100%.
Yeah.
And everything's right in front of your face and right
in
at your
branding, dude.
fingertips.
I'll say this: like having like a marketing background, politics is branding. Like people literally think one party stands for one thing and the opposite is, they make them basically subhuman, and it all has to do with branding. But I would say this: the one thing about those Trump years that I think was a good thing. While there was definitely some bad stuff, it did make it very obvious that that there is a swamp, which you kind of discussed, like you said earlier in the podcast, Tyler, right? Like, and I'm not saying like no one ever knew this before.
Well, I think part of that though too is because the swamp wasn't divided until he was in office. I feel like
I mean,
I feel like there was some
it became worse.
Yeah, it became a lot. I mean, there was a lot
worse.
more cross table talk prior to him being in office. I think everybody can agree with that.
I think it became a lot worse, frankly, like with the invasion of Iraq. Like when I really remember like the country starting to go, it was like you were either the war hawk or whatever you call it, or like that's when we started to divide. And then Obama
wake up, war hog. Is that what you called?
Remember that? Yeah, war hawk.
Wake up, war hog.
And then I think we started to get to divide, and it got worse and worse and worse. But then the media, to your point, I think there were so many more channels too. So it wasn't even just flipping on the television and being like, "Hey, Trump's running, so the sky is falling." Which, by the way, it's the same thing today, right? Biden's in office, and so everyone has these theories about, number one, the sky is falling. There's all this crap about a ton of things. I don't want to get too into it. So it goes both ways. But I think by the time that Trump came around, right, social media was much more mature. Retargeting was much more mature. We're going down the rabbit hole, right? We're radicalizing people. And not to get into politics too deeply, but to kind of circle back to the vaccine. Trump said it was that COVID was what did he call it? Basically said it was a bunch of bullshit that was made up, right? And then I think the other side was going to do anything that, I mean, if somebody slipped on a banana peel, the Democrats were going to say that it was Trump's fault. So they came back really hard. I think the one thing to me that's a little bit crazy. Now, again, we didn't know a lot about the virus at the time, and we do have a duty to protect our fellow citizens. And I think you're right, Seth, right? We want to make sure that it's not spreading, that grandma's not dying and all this kind of stuff. But I do think you have to be completely naive not to think that politics played the biggest role during these COVID years. And politicians were willing to destroy people's lives and businesses, people that had loans out and everything. They were willing to destroy those people just to screw a party and particularly one guy. And I
Okay,
think
but
that
let
is
me ask you
fucking
this question
disgusting.
then. You just said it. He discredited it,
He
right?
did discredit it.
Right.
He's a
I
huge
think we
reason
can. I
why.
think we can all stand on the same page and say we've got a lot of feelings about the vaccine. We got a lot of feelings about how things were performed about it. We got a lot of feelings about where it came from. But it's a thing. Yes, COVID-19 is
it's a real thing.
It was a pandemic. It is a real thing.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I think in summary,
I could if
but do we overreact?
But if he just comes out and puts out a unified front that it's a real thing, are we in the same situation we're in today, or did we lose time because we're sitting here bickering left and right because one side says one thing and eventually
he did.
Why couldn't
and
he
it wasn't
do it
that
right
long after though? Well, no, right away. Of course, yeah, his reaction did make it. It made it very political.
I mean, and I said it since the start because you saw right off the bat. State A couldn't travel to state B, C, D, or E, but state E could travel to state B, and your rate is here and your rate is there. And I said it where I said, could you imagine if we just had one person who said everybody's doing X, Y, and Z? Doesn't matter what X, Y, and Z is. Isn't that what the president's job is to make a cohesive unit that is the country? And all he did was plant seeds of spreading.
Not really, but in modern
he's more
day,
of a figurehead nowadays than
yes,
agreed. Yes, but you see where my point is there, where he certainly all he had to do was I understand what you're saying, where side A was doing everything they could to derive side B and specifically him, and I agree with that. But if he had just actually acknowledged COVID instead of not acknowledging it because of his stubbornness and pigheadedness, probably people would have, been a little bit more of a cohesive unit.
Maybe. The only counter argument.
I mean, he spent the first 3 months of COVID doing daily Twitter fights with Andrew Cuomo. Now, I hate Andrew Cuomo. I am glad that man got everything that came to him. He's a horrible human being. But do we really need to spend our time in our government having a Twitter fight with each other to see whose dick is bigger?
Well, that was the thing, though, right? It's like the Democrats had propped Cuomo up. There was a champion. Dude, religion's a theology. Like it's a true religion nowadays.
Careful. A lot of Democrats did not like Andrew Cuomo and did not like that COVID response.
Fair enough, but when you flipped on the news, it was like here's the hero. He's a
because
he's a Democrat. He's going against Trump.
Yeah, but look at who so we're talking CNN and who was sitting at the desk at CNN. What was his last name?
Cuomo. The brother.
That's what it was.
Oh yeah, and
it was not a Democrats propping him up. It was a CNN Chris Cuomo pushing up his brother, getting to circle jerk each other.
Well, I would respectfully disagree. I do think that he was definitely propped up by a lot of people within that political party.
Oh no. People don't. I guarantee you, people did not like
him. I'm sure there's a lot of people that didn't like him that were.
He was only like the only reason he was in New York for as long as he was, and the only reason people liked him as much as he did, is the rich yuppies in New York City voted for him. People did not like Andrew Cuomo at all.
I'm only going by what I saw on like social media and the news.
Remember, the big problem with a state like New York is a 24 square mile island dictates an entire state.
Yeah, well, that I do.
And that's what happened with the governor. A lot of people do not like Andrew Cuomo, but a lot of people.
I think, to kind of go back to my initial point, it was like, this is an endorsement of either side, because I do think that the last few years has really jaded me. And that's why I'm saying the last 3 years is because if you look at it, it was really 2020 when all this shit started. Now we're in 2023. So like the reaction to that and everything that we've seen, the pharmaceutical commercials, all the money, the reactions, the propping certain people up, celebrating politicians for doing certain things and saying certain things, even though they were flying down to Florida, like all this kind of stuff, right? That was going on. To me, that was like, wow, this is extremely sloppy, and there is a person behind the curtain. Now, I'm not trying to be the person that's saying, look, there's somebody pulling the strings like a marionette, right, with politicians, although I wouldn't doubt it. Here's the thing is, I don't doubt anything anymore. What I do know for a fact is that it's smoke and mirrors, and COVID was weaponized essentially against certain groups of people. And so a technology that I think is a phenomenal technology that will be used moving forward. If they were to say, hey, look, we've come up with some sort of vaccine that's going to cure all the common colds, it's mRNA and all that kind of stuff, mRNA, sorry.
Hard to say.
That's going to, but I think eventually we'll get to something like that. We're going to use this. But now, right, people are no longer going to want to adopt this because of the politics. So it's like politics got in. Here's kind of what I'm trying to get at, right? Politics is a theology. It is now a religion. You have your figureheads, you have your saints, you have your like clergy and all that kind of stuff. You turn the other cheek, you turn a blind eye. You always have to rationalize what you're seeing and do mental gymnastics. So now it's like there's always been the religion versus science, right? And now it's instead of Catholicism versus science or Islam, whatever the hell you pick a religion, now it truly is like the modern two-party system politics versus science. And now they're butting heads. And
listen, as a science side of things, it's painful to watch. It was painful to watch in 2020. It was painful to watch. It's painful to watch these days. And I think it's most painful to watch. Again, not an expert in any sense. What I think I can say is I have a general grasp on scientific research and the scientific process a little bit better than some of the other population. I do have a few degrees that, revolve around that. And the biggest pain is we all went through the school system, right? And I can guarantee you at some point in your schooling, whether you are a science or non-science person, you learned how to cite sources. We can all talk about our days reading encyclopedias. We went to school in the 90s. We knew how to go through encyclopedias. And I feel like that's been lost because you people rather Google and get what CNN or Fox News or
the Daily
WAPO or all of those are going to say, as opposed to taking the time to actually go to SciFinder instead of going to PubMed and looking for the actual science. And that's the problem.
Information is the problem.
Too much information. Absolutely.
People.
The wrong people have the access to the wrong information.
Yes. And
but what's
some
wrong?
sources, some sources people don't trust.
It goes back to that correlation argument where if I try and publish a paper in my field stating that,
bro, I don't think.
But no, what I'm saying is, so if I try and publish that in my field, if I say X versus Y, that's it. It's going to get shut down right away. It's never going to happen. But if a politician says it in front of a lectern and it goes to CNN, no one's going to say anything about that because there's not that review process. That's just them being able to spout it out there.
There needs to be the solution. The solution is a source of information that isn't censored and isn't corrupted by money. And I think your boy Elon's developing it.
Yeah, except that Elon is a child. Except that Elon is a child.
But honestly, that's the solution is finding ways to get people trustworthy information so they're not questioning what they're reading. And it's good information. It's not.
I mean, I agree that's the premise of it, but it even goes deeper than that. We need to revisit our school systems and we need to reteach children how to actually look for reputable resources versus www.google.com.
I think you got to give people reputable resources. I don't think you have to.
And that's fine. You do though. No, you have to give Amanda Fish time out now. Give Amanda Fish, she eats for a day. Teach Amanda Fish, she eats for a lifetime.
Bro, it's not gonna fucking work.
Do you think we gave science a real chance here though? Like nope. You could say, nope. Because for example, right, nope. there is the science that says, okay, the COVID vaccine.
And the biggest problem is I would probably say, I'm not going to do a stake my reputation, have my paychecks for life, none of that. But I'm going to venture a guess that 15 to 20 years from now, they're going to look back and go, the science on COVID is sound. The science on the RMNA vaccine is sound. There's going to be tweaks along the way. Just like if you were to reel back the last 20 years of a child's vaccination stem for the first 5 years of their life, that's changed over the last 20 years. So I'm not saying that what right here is it, but I guarantee you they're going to look at the grand scheme of things and say, you know what? The science behind the vaccine is sound. Here's the destined path of it. This is better.
But do you think we gave the opposing viewpoint their science a fair chance as well?
What is their science?
Like,
It doesn't sound like it based on Seth's response.
So what? But that's my question: is what is? So no, that's fine. But what is their science?
It was censored, a lot of it. I would be willing to.
So you can't tell me what it is then.
well, no, I'm saying, well, I mean, I could give examples, but I would
Go
say,
ahead. Give me an example.
The first example would
Mhm.
be people saying this is not safe, like the healthcare professionals, this is not safe. Don't take this. There's going to be long-term side effects.
And I think in 15 to 20 years, if it
They
truly
could
is
be
said
right.
that it is, then no, there
Well,
is no long-term side effects.
I hope that they're wrong for the sake that it's in my body. And I
The big
basically felt
problem.
like I had to get it.
So
in
the
order
other
for
big
variety.
problem is people want an all or not, right? It either
Well,
100% is safe and no one's ever going to get hurt by it, or it's not safe and everybody's going to get myocarditis and die. And that's not how science works. That's not how science works in any aspect at all.
I get that.
It's just not.
But like,
Anytime you
also,
put anything in your body, there's a chance that there's a side effect. Again, I go back to the argument of Tylenol and it killing your livers and kidneys. That's how it happens. You're putting things into your body that you don't naturally produce.
do
the benefits vastly outweigh the risks? Absolutely. In 15 years, they're going to find that.
I don't know if you can make that statement without understanding the long-term risks.
I didn't say it's a statement. It said that I think that's what's going to happen. That's
No,
not a
you
personal
just
statement.
you just said yes.
In my opinion, I
Yeah.
think in 15 years, absolutely, they're going to say it will. In
I
my
hope-
opinion.
Yeah, I hope you're right.
I hope you're right
This
too.
ends up being a good thing. Yeah, but I would say,
But you
so
have
the
to.
other the other
so-
science though, Seth. Oh, go ahead. You're gonna finish
well,
this
my
part.
statement is you guys keep talking about, well, don't censor and don't say the bad things. My hope is that you give it a chance to be a good thing. Don't just keep saying, no, it's bad. We're not going to look into this. We're not going to trust this. It's bad. Give it a chance to prove that it's good. I'll give you a chance to prove that it's not good. You give me a chance to prove that it's good. That's all I'm
Well,
saying.
I guess the thing is, I have to give
That's
it.
all I'm saying.
I have to give it potentially a decade or more to prove that it's good. Otherwise, maybe in a decade, it's like, hey, we're finding that like a lot of people, 33%, a third of the people that had this shot are getting cancer.
But are they going to
It's
put
like,
that information out there? Are they even going to put that information out there?
I would
They're not
like a
gonna fucking
resource
do
of
it.
that one. I would love a
No,
resource
I'm
of
not saying-
33%.
No, he didn't.
No,
He didn't say
that was
was
hypothetical.
true.
That was
Oh,
hypothetical.
okay. I heard it
Yeah,
as him saying
that was
we're
hypothetical.
finding it. No.
I'm saying I give it a chance, and then all of a sudden it's
if,
like,
if in 15
oh, I'm
years
dead.
they say a third of the people have cancer, I will be very sad for science.
Is that information
For
going
science,
to
not
make it
for
out there?
yourself,
I
not
don't
for
think it
yourself and
would
your
if that's the
family.
case. I don't think
No,
the
not for
information
myself and
will
my
make.
family, for science stuff. But that's the thing. How do you hide that? How do you hide? How many vaccines were administered?
Bro, you link. How do you
No.
prove that it was like you were talking earlier? How do you prove that it was related to the vaccine?
I mean,
that I got a heart
here's the
attack
thing.
10 years later.
Here's the thing. You're
I
going to
don't know
run
if you
into
can.
people. You're going to run into people who are going to try and disprove it. The hope is that there are good people, which there are. There are always going to be good people out there who are going to do good science. I have a belief that at the end of the day, good science will always prevail.
You're too trusting.
That's
in
why
my opinion.
the autism claim was disproven. That's why you see people getting papers pulled all the time. That's why you see people losing degrees because of falsified data. There are bad people who lie, but there are just, and it's not even good people doing good things. Here's the problem. Scientists are dicks. They are horrible human beings. They don't do things. They don't do things to prove, like to make good for the people. They do things because they hate the person who got the paper, so they want to disprove that person. That's why they do things. So every time a paper comes out, someone's rival is going to try and prove them wrong.
But you factor in political agendas and money. I feel like the science gets pushed to the side. That's going to be,
and that's why
problem.
It gets drowned out.
I really want you guys to take the 20-minute IRB course on financial conflict of interest, and I think you will feel a lot better about where money and science is going.
I don't think so.
Shell companies. No,
Yeah,
let me get to the next thing though, right? Because I want to keep this
politicians
kind of
walking out with multi-million fucking on $100,000 a year salary. Like, 10, how the fuck does that happen?
10%. Wait, so what about the science of like, do you think that not we, right? But okay, do you think that the people that, as a society, I'll say we as a society, do you think we did an appropriate job of trying to look at the data and dissect the data, right? Around, like we discussed before, COVID was so bad, right? Not because the virus itself was as deadly as we thought it was initially, but because of the underlying health issues that we have as an epidemic itself in America. Like, do we think we gave that argument a fair enough chance?
Given the day-to-day circumstances and the push for the numbers and the critical masses and everything at our fingertips today, I think they did what they could. Do I think it's ideal science setting and that it was good done in an ideal science world? No, absolutely not. And we're seeing that now with having to backpedal on things. But at the same time, you've got to put yourself in people's shoes. Here's $10, go do something that costs $50. That's basically what you're telling these people, right? Is you have this much time to do something that takes this much time. They did the best they could do. They made mistakes. Things are wrong. It happens. No one is right 100% of the time.
Okay? Yeah, I think they did the best they could. I think other people did the best that they would do, and I think a lot of that was politically charged. But I do think here's the big thing though, Seth, is this: they did the best that they could. Her, my parents, my family, my loved ones, you guys, I don't want us to pay the fucking price because they did the best that they could.
Absolutely understandable. Absolutely understandable.
Because I want to know then who the fuck was the one making the calls before we all go down.
The alternative is you don't dive in and you die of COVID. Then what?
I wasn't dying of COVID.
Yes, but you're also a well-fit individual.
I was going to jujitsu. Well, that's the thing then. Then maybe it's.
Why the fuck did I have to get it then?
I guess no one's going to lose 100 pounds.
Military made me get it. No, military made me get it.
But I'm not saying you should get it. What I'm saying is if you don't get it, you're going to end up finding restrictions because that's just the way that's the way it went before COVID. Everybody seems to think that COVID is different than the measles.
COVID is different than the Spanish flu vaccine. This one came out so fucking fast and they forced people to get it. That's the fucking problem.
So let me ask you this, Tyler. Let me ask you this.
The other ones are proven. The other ones are proven with long-term side effect studies, right?
So you're gonna wait 30 years to get it?
I wouldn't have got it if I didn't have to.
But 30 years from now, would you get it? If they told you have to get it every year, 30 years from now, because if you don't get it, you die from COVID.
65-year-old, probably not.
Then this is a mute point. This is, you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm never going to
If I was 20, 30 years from now, then maybe. But I'm 65 years old.
I think a big difference too is like we got measles, smallpox, all that's polio, right? We got vaccinated for that when we were kids because like in that case, we didn't have a choice because we had no self-agency, right?
Oh, don't tell me you're one of these people.
No.
Are you upset that your parents circumcised you? Did you know that's a thing? Did you know there are people who are trying to sue their parents because they didn't get a say to be circumcised when they were born? Look it up, dude. It's fucking crazy.
Dude, this reminds me of a funny
fucking crazy.
But no, I'm saying I guess the difference is, and I'm glad I got vaccinated as a child 100%. I want to be clear about that. But like there was no self-agency. And but I think here there is a self-agency, but there's a sense of self-agency. But I do think like I wouldn't be where I'm at in my career today if I decided to be unvaccinated. I was qualified, I was, on all that stuff, but I couldn't get it based on a shot. So in a way, it was like, hey, you could either get vaccinated and you're going to go up here, or you could stay unvaccinated, you're going to stay down here, and you're going to have to work your way up like over a longer time. It's just so in a way, I feel forced.
Can I bring in a vaccine that you guys probably actually are not familiar with? Have you guys heard of the HPV vaccine?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, so that one came out in 2006.
Wait, you said you took it down?
I did.
You should take it.
They have it for guys?
Anybody can get HPV.
3-part shot, I think.
I know guys. Yeah, I didn't know if they had it.
I took it in 2015 or 2016.
Anybody can get it. Anybody can get HPV. HPV has been linked to cervical cancer.
Yeah, you can
and throat
cancer.
You can transport it. Yeah, exactly.
You're more likely to give it to a woman. So I was like, fuck it.
So we're not even 20 years into that vaccine, and you still got that one.
I was younger then. I didn't have the knowledge I have now.
You would have not gotten a vaccine.
I didn't have the distrust for our government and big companies back then that I do now. I wasn't as smart as I was. I wasn't as smart as I am now as I back then.
Smart or distrusting.
I believed in. I got it. I got it through the military too. I got it. They're like, hey, you could get this. You won't give a girl HPV.
I was a little surprised that you. I was a little surprised that you said you got that one. I don't believe I've ever gotten that one.
Yeah. But again, it's fucking information. That's the fucking. That's the root of all of this. Getting people good sources of information that they can trust.
So to
You
you, what
can-
would be a good source of information?
We
You
were able
keep
to be
saying get
conflicted
good
now.
sources, get
More
good
conflicted
sources.
now
So
than we were
what
before.
Bro,
wanna
if I
know
had the
what
solution, I'd be a billionaire. But I think it's something like Twitter that's fact checked. I think it's things that aren't. It's not CNN. It's not NBC. It's sources
it's
like
not the media at all. It's not the
no.
media at all.
It's sources that aren't censored that get fact checked. That's why I like community notes on Twitter, and I think that's a good. It's heading the right direction.
You know,
Right?
I used to
But
feel that way about NPR, but I feel like NPR is now starting to. It's kind of obvious now that they're starting to be a little politicized. So I guess my point here is like you have a source that's supposed to be completely agnostic and fair and transparent, but over at what point does that even start to become corrupted?
yeah, I bet probably
Well,
when
you
money
raised
gets
the
involved,
question again.
who
You
pays for
raised the
their
question.
advertising?
Who's and I this is not a shot at Elon. I know you guys like to think that I hate it, but
You do hate them.
Twitter is funded. Am I wrong in that sense?
Well, Twitter files, we got to talk about that.
Yeah, but
whole episode on that
Bro.
one. I got to reread them.
bro, it's not Twitter in general, right? There's some fucking nonsense on Twitter.
Right, but who's going to fact check Twitter?
It's the community notes. Those that is the fact check. That is the checks and balances.
I've literally never used community notes. I don't even know what you're talking
They
about.
come
So
up.
please.
They'll come up on certain posts.
Especially like when influential people post
articles.
articles, they'll be like, well,
Oh, that's
other
all it
people are
is.
saying
All that
this.
is literally the other people, or this has been okay. Then I know what
Yeah.
that is. I think that's the way to
Where
go.
is that coming from? Where is that coming
But
from?
I think I'm not sure. I feel like
that's
people
my
who
question.
disagree with it can go in and
Right.
make comments and put like facts that disagree with whatever the person says. I don't know
think-
how it works either.
So there was here's an example, Seth, because you said you don't use it. Somebody had so the whole Bud Light thing, and Modelo became like the number one sponsor or number one beer in the country, and some kid had posted something saying like, haha, these clowns don't like know that it's owned by and I guess what is it, Anheuser-Busch.
Yeah.
And then
I think Modelo is owned by.
so they were, I think at one time they were, but it says in 20 community notes, in 2013, Constellation Brands acquired Grupo Modelo's U.S. beer business from Anheuser-Busch and InBev for approximately 4.75 billion. Transaction includes full ownership with complete control of all aspects of the U.S. commercial business. So this was that was sort of fact checking, I guess. I don't know. Is this just, I guess, that had to be scraped?
I guess you run into my only worry is you run into a circle is so now we're trusting what other people fact check it is, but where do they get their facts from?
That's exactly, man. I don't trust that shit either half the time.
But you're not just taking the one source of information, you're getting the other side of the argument.
Which again goes way back to which goes way back to in our small sample size of the three of us. I think we generally can agree we all do that. We all do our research and we look at both sides of things. But the vast population does not, and that's been weaponized almost.
I would say
I feel like it's been weaponized.
I wouldn't say I always do it.
I do.
Sometimes I'll do a Google search, and
I just don't give a fuck enough.
I love this shit. I love my favorite thing to do is just Google. So when I saw that RFK was on Joe Rogan, I literally just Googled Joe Rogan, and then you know how it goes like in the news, and it spits like 6 different articles out. Literally side by side articles talked about the same thing and had completely different headlines. I was like, that's case in point right there. That is, I don't even have to read the 2 articles.
Dude, my favorite thing to do is to see something, and then I always love to see if like I see something and then I will Google like CNN and then I'll put the headline and then it just won't show up, and it's just like, and you do that with certain media outlets. Then there's like, why are they not covering it, but MSNBC is, Fox is, but they're not. And I just love to just kind of do a comparison of who's covering what. But if you do a Google search, sometimes you see like the top 3 stories are from like the same 3 outlets that all align with each other. Typically you're like, okay, like they're all like these, it's always these 3 at the top, they all say the same thing. Somebody's toting the political line here.
Did you actually,
I think I'm just apathetic.
I gotta piss. I'll be right back. I'm not gonna lie.
Okay, let me open this up.
Yeah, I think I talked to you about it. I wasn't sure if I brought it up to Seth.
Well, he's fucking crazy, right?
Yeah, dude, that dude's nuts. No, this website, allsides.com, gives you articles from the right, from the center, and from the left. It's another good,
which is good, man. Which is good. Dude, the whole Hunter Biden thing is something I would love to talk about on one podcast. Oh, it's look into it. It's a little it's something. Put it that way. That was a whole other thing too, remember? And that was the Twitter files. Remember the Hunter Biden laptop thing getting swept under the rug and all that? And now that came back around.
Bro, for me, I don't even pay attention to any of this shit unless we're gonna talk about it or something, because I don't know what the fuck's true. I just don't know. Don't fucking know.
It's like I said, so I don't really watch the news anymore. I got off of social media because every day I got on, I had obviously coming from New York City, right? Like all my friends that I made there, they leaned one way. And so every time you got on Instagram, it was like, oh, the sky's falling and this and that, and you need to vote this way, otherwise you got blood on your hands or you're a bad person. And here are the 5 things you need to do to be a good person. I was like, you know what? I just want to get on Instagram and just like see what's up, have some fun, look at some, funny videos. I don't
See
want to
my
be
friends on
like,
vacation or see some
yeah,
memes
like
or
I don't
some
need to be
shit.
fucking lectured on politics right now. I want some sort of escape. So I was like, I'm done. That was one reason. I'm like, I'm done. I'm out of it. The other reason was because, like, I think I told you, it was like a reaction. I was just always pull it up when I was bored for a split second.
Right.
So I got rid of that. But I think, well, anyway, yeah, Seth, you're back. So
Seth, did you see this? Have you ever seen this website before?
I literally just clicked into it.
Allsides.com.
Is this the conglomeration website? They conglomerate everybody's.
Yeah, it'll find articles from the right, from the left, and from the middle about the same topic, and it's pretty interesting.
We were talking about how we don't really watch the news, and I was saying with like social media, that really made me disconnect from it because I got tired of being lectured every day when I was like, just unsolicited advice as far as how I should be a good person. It was always political. So I stopped watching the news because that fired everybody up and made them think that the world was going to explode. But then I told a friend that, and they were like, yeah, but you know what? Like silence is violence, and you need to advocate for certain groups and all this kind of stuff. And like, part of me was like, I guess, even though I don't know who the fuck you think I am, like I'm actually gonna I have power. But like, so like once in a while I'll just like, and Twitter, by the way, like you go on there and you see some stuff, but like you're getting targeted certain things.
I was gonna say Twitter literally has a For You tab where it conglomerates the things you've looked at.
I love Twitter though, dude, because the fact that there's a forum where people from all over the world can comment on the same thing and people talking shit to each other
and say whatever the fuck they want.
But some people are so fucking funny, dude. Like that Anheuser-Busch thing. The reason I took a screenshot is because some guy just comments, "You just clowned yourself, bro." Like, and it was like just like little things like that. Like some random kid from like St. Louis, Missouri, is commenting on somebody from like I don't know Dublin, Ireland, or whatever. And
it also brings like influential people within your grasp if you say the right things, right?
Yeah,
like
that's true.
You could say something and fucking Michael Jordan could retweet it or whatever, like
the funniest is people are like this one girl was like, why was the first thing I saw on Twitter today a lion mauling a person, and then they like at Elon Musk, and it's like you a fucking moron. You think he's really gonna like reply to you? Like he's just waiting for your tweet. Everyone ats him like they're actually like he's actually gonna respond to every single tweet, and he's decent about replying to people, but usually it's like they've got a blue check mark. I'm not saying like he does it only because they
so he's paid $8 a month
because they pay $8 a month. No, but they've got a following. Maybe he follows them or something like that, right? It's not like just like Joe Schmo, like, hey, I'm having delays on my Twitter feed. He's like, oh yeah, I'll look into it. Like why are you doing that? You're making yourself look like a jackass.
What's the next topic? I'm done with vaccines.
Yeah, don't get them anymore. So wait, Seth, I think that you said.
I mean, you're going to turn into an alien.
Well, okay, aliens. If we found aliens, would you endorse testing on aliens?
I think we should inject them with the COVID vaccine and see what happens.
Okay, first of all, it's just horribly scientifically based, but no.
It'd be like ants. You put the food out and then they eat it. They take it back to their colony. You could inject one with a COVID vaccine, send it back, and then everybody dies, and you go colonize their planet.
Okay, let me ask you this: if that were the case, why wouldn't I just give them poison to bring back to their community and kill them, and the threat would be gone? Duh.
That's true. You could just be like, look at these chocolates, and it's like cyanide inside. Something like that. Well, look, I think it's a healthy conversation. Honestly, I think
it is.
What do we still disagree on? I just like in summary.
I think the big thing is Seth feels. Well, here are the things that I would. I don't mean to like point at you, Seth, specifically, but I think.
Except you just said Seth.
I did just say your name though. I think you disagree that we were forced. I don't think we were forced in the sense of like gun to head.
I don't disagree.
Bro,
I don't like the term
forced.
I don't like the term.
No,
I don't like the term forced.
How is their livelihood not threatened?
They were coerced.
I mean, did you have a gun to your head and it was death or get the vaccine?
It was quit your fucking job or you don't. It was either get the vaccine or quit your fucking job or you're fired
or you can't get this job or the Canadian truckers, even though they're not American.
Anybody in the federal government. You could have worked there for 25
Actually,
years.
I need to research that because I'm afraid that I keep saying that their bank accounts were frozen because they weren't
I think
vaccinated.
their bank accounts were frozen because they stopped working. They were doing the roadblock.
I would agree that everybody was
maybe that
forced,
could be it too.
but government
there's two sides to every
employees,
story.
I'll
I never
agree.
saw the one.
I'll
Government
agree.
employees,
Yeah. So
forced.
let's not say that. So let's not say that people were forced. Let's say that in certain professions, the ultimatum was given: job or shot or no job.
It wasn't an ultimatum.
It's not 1% of people.
Synonym for.
It wasn't 1% of people. It was a good percentage of people.
I didn't say 1%.
No.
Absolutely.
I'm saying it's
and
not negligible. Right?
I think I even said that most of the people that were given the ultimatum should not have been. I still to this day will stand on the fact that if you are treating people, you probably should be protected against what you're treating people for, or treating people who have the potential to get it.
Okay, so we don't disagree. Some people were forced, some people weren't.
Right.
And some people should have been forced, I think is where.
Correct. I think that's where the line is. That is the line, is that you believe no one should have been forced.
Yes.
And I believe that, again, there are certain people who, because of the environment they work in, absolutely. Can you imagine someone who works in a chemo ward who's not vaccinated, walks in and gets all those chemo patients sick, and all of a sudden they all die because they have no defense against it, even if they were vaccinated?
Well, even if they were vaccinated, though, they could still give all those people COVID.
I mean, again, the spreading of it is much less, but again, that's fine.
Okay. So
dog pound.
Yeah, nice job, Rich.
I think but here's, and that wasn't even trying to be like sarcastic. That's just
you thought of that one.
Fact. That's just the fact, right? Is that we found out later on you could still spread it, but
but the risk goes down.
So that's one thing we're still not seeing eye to eye.
Because we haven't.
I think that's pretty much the main.
I think we actually, again, this is why I was excited.
We all agree that vaccines in general are a good thing for the human population.
Right. And
I disagree about doing trials with ivermectin before.
No, I don't know. I was kind of just creating conversation. I don't know what I actually believe.
I think the big thing from that is the sole fact that one is self-administered, and you have to be more careful when you are giving permission for self-administered things. You do.
I think I'm just being skeptical of our government
and that's allowed,
and companies
and that's
that why it wasn't explored, and maybe it was.
Right. And I think they are currently exploring it, I believe.
One capsule up your ass every 8 hours.
And just this whole censorship of Joe Rogan, which I don't know if we disagree on. It just baffles me.
I mean, I don't think he's censored anymore, though. Spotify is allowing him to do whatever, right?
The attempt, no, because he went to Spotify.
Oh, yeah.
YouTube.
I think the big thing is that just shows just how fucked up media is.
Yeah.
Like, why is media even doing this? They're not connected to it. Joe Rogan has a podcast. Do I disagree with some of the stuff he says and believes?
I do too.
Absolutely.
Oh yeah.
Do I think that he should potentially? I think that he needs to own himself a little more. I think this is what bothers me about him, is he claims. So this is what Mark Cuban went after him for. I don't know if you followed anything that Cuban and him went into. Cuban basically told him that his whole stance is that he's against mainstream media and pushing agendas, and for the most part he doesn't really push an agenda. But when you have someone like RFK on, and then you bully the guy that you want to debate him, you are pushing an agenda. Might not be yours, but you're pushing a agenda.
I think somebody commented on his shit though, right? And then he commented back and said, why don't we fucking debate it?
So the doctor reposted the Vice article shitting on Spotify, and Joe Rogan was like, $100,000 to the charity of your choice, come debate it live. And the doctor was like, here's my number, I don't want to do it. And I can't blame him, because again,
are you sure?
No. I think a Vice article shits on Spotify, saying that they claimed that they were going to censor Joe Rogan and they didn't. That was retweeted by the doctor.
And then he said some shit though.
I don't think I thought he just retweeted it.
No, the one thing I read, he quote tweeted and said some shit. Hold on, let's see if I can find it. But
the downside of the story is then Elon comes in and chimes in with the most ridiculous thing ever, because that's Elon. And then Mark Cuban came in and basically was like, just own and that's what it is. Just own who you are, dude. It's okay. It's okay that you have a thought on it. It's not even like, no one's even mad that you have a thought on it. Just own that you have a thought on it. And I think that's my big issue with certain people. So my big issue, let's pull another one in. Aaron Rodgers.
Ugh.
My big issue with Aaron Rodgers was never that he was not vaccinated. Never at all. In fact, he actually has a decent excuse and did research, and I understand why he wasn't vaccinated at that time. I get it. My big issue with Aaron Rodgers is that he dropped I'm immunized, and he thought that was the same thing because he read one article that said it was. He deliberately misled people, right? That's my big issue.
Did he deliberately mislead others, or?
I'm sorry, he was point blank asked, "Are you immunized? Or did you get the COVID vaccine?" And he goes, "I'm immunized." Is that not misleading?
Well, yeah. I mean, I get what you're saying. Yeah.
So that's my only that and a few other things that he then claimed to. He claimed he read 10 papers, and so he knows more about COVID than the scientists, which bugged me a little bit because I've watched football for more than 10 years and I don't know more than oh, here we go. Perfect.
So quoted, Spotify has stopped even trying to stem Joe Rogan's vaccine misinformation.
So you're right. So he
And then Rogan
retweeted the Vice article.
this.
Yeah. Which, look, I think it's great, but at the same time, I don't think you can knock the guy for saying no to this. His job isn't to talk in public. That's not fair. Rogan's got a guy who preps stuff for him. RFK is going to have a guy who preps stuff for him. This is a scientist. It's his job to do science.
Yeah, but bro, if you come out online saying this shit, you know they're going to come at you.
Oh, absolutely. And I have no
be
problem
willing
with
to defend your stance
I have
in
no
a public
problem.
forum.
I have no problem with Joe coming at him. I have more of a problem with Elon coming in from left field.
What did he say down here? Oh, he responded to Joe's.
Maybe Peter Hotez hates Jerry.
He like Elon doesn't have any
quote tweeting each other, so you can't see it all.
It's so obnoxious. It's so obnoxious. And then good luck trying to find a proper summary of what actually happened.
So this dude, but do you respond to that saying you have my cell and my email? Always willing to speak.
Look for Mark Cuban's response. Because then they come at Cuban for being big pharma, and Cuban's like, dude, I literally run a company that gives people meds for cheap. So how am I big pharma?
Do you remember
I'll stop sharing.
Do you remember when like that whole Rogan thing went down? People were saying like it was how deadly that was. And then when Elon Musk had bought Twitter, people said that was the end of democracy. And like no one talks about that anymore. It's just people are so fucking fickle.
Well, because it's in the minute. It's in the moment, right? People are fired up, and people want to have a soapbox to stand on. I do not think that anything Joe Rogan does is deadly if we use our brains. Again, but do we as a collective in America use our brains all the time? No.
Bro, so what's the bigger issue?
It's a source of uncensored information.
Rich just said it. What's the bigger issue? Again, I'm saying Joe Rogan isn't the bigger issue. I don't agree with everything he says and does, but I also am intellectual enough to know that I'm not going to follow him like a sheep. Unfortunately, most people who listen to him are.
You know, I have to wonder.
Tyler, I know you're looking at it going, I don't do that. And I know you don't because you're smart.
That's a made-up statistic, right? Most people, I don't know how to prove that or make that statement.
Won't say most, but
some people do.
Exactly.
Some people do.
Exactly. And that's why it can be dangerous.
If you look at Pearl Harbor, right?
Bro, it's uncensored information. It's better than censored CNN
I'm okay
bullshit.
With it. I'm okay with it. And I'm even okay that Joe Rogan doesn't say, you know, these are the thoughts and opinions are of mine and the guest, we fact check X, Y, and Z. We don't fact check this. Like, I'm fine that they don't say that.
I mean, he brings on experts in their fields, right?
But again, and I'm fine that he doesn't say that.
The mushroom guy,
bro, the amount of topics he talks about is insane.
It's insane. Yeah, the experts he brings on though always crack me up sometimes. Not that I like doubt their.
Did you hear the physicist talking about the quantum computing? I got lost during that one.
No, dude.
Talking about how nature is a computer.
That's my favorite guy. Wait, let me ask you this, right? So if you look at
that's a fun theory. The nature is a computer. I think I've heard that one.
It's all about quantum computing. You should listen to that one.
Did you hear this whole theory that birds are like government spies?
They're not real. Birds aren't real. Have you never heard that theory before? It's so fucking hilarious. Stupid. That's why they sit on power wires to recharge.
Yeah, people are ridiculous. So Pearl Harbor happens, right? A bunch of people, so many boys lie about their age. Men go out, they enlist. Right, 9/11 happens. A lot of boys go out, they enlist in the military. COVID happens. 50%. I'm just to make it easier here. 50% of the country doesn't want to get a vaccine. 50% of the country wants to get a vaccine. right? These are events that are massive events, right? Hugely impacting events. Do you think COVID also showed that like if there's a lot of adversity or there's something that we need to come together and beat, like can Americans do that anymore?
No, we're giant pussies.
Like
Dude,
if China, if China
I
were
go
to
back
invade,
to
half the kids would be like, "We need
I
to go
go
up with
back to
communism, and
I
it's
go
our
back
fault for
to I think it
colonization."
was February. I think it was February 2020. So COVID was rampant in Europe, right? But we really hadn't seen it yet.
Yeah, yeah.
And I saw two different articles and I just wanted to throw up because it just showed just how deluded we were as Americans.
What did it say?
In Italy, families weren't able to watch their family members be buried because of COVID, right?
Mm.
They were locked in their homes, but their families had to go on the ground because nobody knew what dead bodies with COVID did, right? So you were missing family burials. In America, there was an uproar because Coachella was canceled.
And that goes
Like,
back to what
what
Tyler
the
opened up saying.
fuck?
We live in such a good country that the problems that we
Yeah,
think we have today
I'm
are fucking trivial.
grateful to be here. I know we spend a fuck ton of money on the military, and it probably could go in other places, but it partially pay. I mean, it because of the amount of money we spend on our defense budget, it allows us to live this life that we
Yeah,
do.
it protects our interests. Yeah.
Well, and they're not all the best interests of the world, right? Like
Sure.
we're in some places for our own financial interests. A
Yeah,
lot
sure.
of probably all of
For
the
sure.
places.
Most of the places were.
Yeah.
Why
for
are we?
sure.
Why I've always asked this question. I understand that we have vested interest in places, blah blah blah. But like, why, when there's some conflict, do we need to be that? We need to be there and fix it, person. Why? Like, why?
Opportunity, dude. Like, it's funny. I've been reading about the Roman Civil War. And there's so many parallels, man, between like the onset of the Civil War and the smear campaigns against Caesar and his and Caesar's side against the Pompey. Just like it's like it's a tale as old as time, right? And like some of the things you think about Caesar today, like some of those things are accurate, of course. Other things are embellishments because they wanted to make him into a demon because that conflicted with their interests. But like you go back to even back then, right? Politicians are fighting each other all the time. Um, Again, it's there's so many parallels, right? But then when you ask the question like why do we get involved in certain things? Like why when this one little town got invaded or whatever by like Carthage, right? Rome is there. Rome was always going certain places or inserting themselves in the conflict because there was opportunity, right? There was money coming through, there was a port, there was a strategic juncture at roads, whatever it is, on a river, slaves, whatever it is. They always found a way to insert themselves
And
into certain positions
for
because it
us,
strengthened the empire. It
yeah,
strengthened Rome.
for us, it's
It's the
oil.
same thing.
It's for
It's dude.
platforms to project our power against potential near peer enemies, right?
Look at China and Africa. Why do you think China is building like 5
We're in
lane
Africa.
highways and huge cities? And
We
us
have
in Africa,
because of
we're
China.
getting pushed out, bro. But yeah, well, that's true. But like they're look at what they're doing right now, and they're making sure they're like taking on the lithium mines and like all these crazy like they're playing the long game. These big countries are always going to find like anytime. What was that one? Chaos is a ladder from Game of Thrones. Peter Baelish had said it. And that one scene, chaos is a ladder. And that's the truth. That's why we're in places where we shouldn't be. That's why the Romans did it. That's why the Greeks did it.
The US, Russia, China, all of us do it. All of the world major powers do it.
Destabilize.
But I want to answer your first question. Will the US, if someone invades us, be able to come together and
you'll have half the people saying like let's go fight and die, and the other half's gonna
not in
welcome
2023.
It's it's different. COVID is different than a war, an attack on home soil. You don't have an enemy. You don't have an enemy in a vaccine. You don't have an enemy that is trying to take your life.
Let me ask you a question.
Disease.
What if one side says we want to go do X and the other side says we want to go do Y?
I think you see it always happens. It always has happened in the past, and maybe it's a little different this time because of probably social media propaganda in both directions. But war has always united our country.
It has. No, I agree. Well, outside
and it's always been a big money maker for the country, which is
outside of Vietnam.
Iraq, Vietnam.
That's a good point.
I don't know.
Yeah, but remember,
we were attacked on home soil.
I was going to say, but remember too, Iraq stemmed from Afghanistan, which stemmed from a home soil. Like, there was some dissension, but at the same time, you were still like, for the boys, for the troops and all that. And like Vietnam, I think was the only time you really truly saw two definitive, we should be there, we shouldn't be there sides.
But neither of those were near peer adversaries, right?
Well, that's because in the
This
60s, everybody was doing dope.
If China fucking attacks us, that's World War III.
For sure.
How-
That's the other thing
how-
too, dude. Is like remember when Trump killed they killed that one Iranian guy, and everyone's like, "Oh, World War III," and there was like celebrities apologize. They were apologizing to Iran, and then now we're almost on the verge of World War III. So back when Trump did when Trump did that, the Trump administration, I should say, the Democrats were saying this guy's going to get us into World War III. Now that we're in Ukraine, the Republicans are saying we're going to be in World War III. It's people are just so fucking fickle. But here's the one thing, right? This younger generation, there was like a survey on a college campus where it was like a third of them said we should try communism. Like millennials said we should try communism. There's a lot of young millennials and Gen Zs that go over to like Vietnam, and they're like, they hate this, they hate America, take me back, I want to go back here. And it's like, look, you just went over there on the American dollar. Everyone's nice to you because they want your dollar. You didn't stay and sleep in where an average citizen in Vietnam sleeps. You stayed in a fucking resort, so your whole lens is skewed. But there's a lot of Americans that literally think America is like this not so good place, and they buy into they look at a lot of the bad things that we've done, and they fail to realize a lot of the good things that we've done for the world as well. So I think that I don't think we would have the level of support that you maybe think we would, because there's a lot of people now, a lot of Americans that don't see what we have.
There's no way.
I see where
There's
Tyler's
no way
coming from. I
in
think
a
it's the.
World
I would like to
War III
think that everyone would be like,
scenario.
yeah, we're gonna go
I mean,
fucking
I
kill
also
all
think
people
though
because they
that like
invaded us, but
I think that a lot of times we get lost in the loud minority and we miss the silent majority. Like a lot of times the vocal party is the lesser of it, right? It goes way back, forget anything political in sense. It goes back to something I learned when I worked in retail, where you can do something right and nice 10 times in a row and you're not going to get a comment card, but you do one thing wrong and that person's going to give you a complaint card. So I think the greater thing would be, I think there'd be more pushback than you saw, say, after 9/11 or during World War II or World War I. But I think generally speaking, we would be a cohesive unit.
If they
I would hope
come
so.
and attack us on our own soil, which personally I don't believe will happen.
No, dude,
I feel like the world's too interconnected nowadays to
I don't think you're going to see.
Well, we're their number one consumer, but also
to see a world
it's
superpower
also-
attack
also,
another world
yeah,
superpower.
get lit
they're
up
all too.
too,
You
dude.
don't become a world superpower by knocking out people who are as big as you.
Right.
Like that just doesn't happen.
Right.
This is the argument I had. This again. We gotta have a discussions with Fly episode. I wish I should save my conversation with him. He's full on convinced within the next 5 years we're gonna be in full blown war with China. And I was like, but no, because China's smart and we're smart. There will be checks and balances. There will be, that what was it, the ship that got blown up or something near Taiwan or whatever. I forget. He sent me something about it. I didn't even read it. I think it was on a weekend too, so it's probably half in the bag, but that's fine. But yeah, but that was like you got to keep them in check, right? You can't just let them do whatever. But that also is not going to be us going like, all right, World War now, bitch. I don't think that's going to happen.
I think we're drawing the line at Taiwan, and I think whatever happens in Taiwan will be it'll be interesting to see what unfolds. I feel
that would be mostly a naval war though, and probably air. I don't think that would be like. I mean, again, I'm not an expert, but I imagine that it wouldn't be like World War II, where it's like, okay, let's round up 3 million boys and send them over to China. We think, you guys think that if there was some sort of crisis, that America still has the capacity to come together.
I think if it's a large scale attack on
if it was
US
large
soil,
virus, yeah.
If it's a large scale attack on U.S. soil, and we're gonna retaliate, and I think we'll be more united than we were in the COVID vaccine issue.
Yeah, people always talk about like September 12th and like how united we were on September 12th, and like coming from that area, I can tell you, like, people were as thick as thieves for a while.
I mean, it wasn't even that area. Literally, I was in Podunk, Vermont at that time, and you couldn't drive anywhere and not see flags on people's front yards.
Same for me.
Yeah.
I was in PA, I think, at the time, Pennsylvania.
Were you? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, I know America in general was certainly really was united for sure, right? And everyone was supportive of not, kind of the Afghan war initially and all that kind of just everything, right? To your point, there's flags everywhere. I mean, I don't know. I think there'd be a lot of camps. I think there'd be a lot of pushback. There'd be a lot of
I think
protests.
what I think what gets lost though too, remember though, is there's a big difference between supporting a war and supporting warriors, right? Like
Well,
a
yeah, but
lot of
dude,
people,
nobody,
dude, in
not,
Vietnam, dude, if you look back at Vietnam, people did not like the soldiers either.
yeah,
I
that's
don't think you
correct.
see
But if
that
you look
today. I
at,
think you see a lot of people who would fight the idea of the war, but would not be angry towards the soldiers.
I don't
I
know.
don't
I
know,
think if we get
man.
attacked
I
on
don't know.
homeland and it's a large scale near peer or peer adversary, I think it's going to be different than anything we've seen since World War II.
Dude,
I think a lot
I don't
depends.
want to, I
I
don't
think a
want to
lot depends
generalize.
on who's in the swamp at the time, because you know that there's going to be some new age people on both sides who are like, well, this was bound to happen, or well, we shouldn't strike back. It's there will be people who
We
don't
should show
approve
them
of it.
love.
Yeah.
Love conquers all.
Let's go give them a giant group of their support groups
Yeah,
in
and
your
then we'll
home
see
if
you
you
on
need
we'll
it.
see you on the news getting your fucking head cut off
But
when
yeah,
you go try and do that.
but I don't think any conflict with like a China or something. I think it's going to be something not in the homeland, right? It's going to be something like
I don't think we're going to get Homeland. I really don't think it's going to be.
it's
I
going to
don't
be
think it's going to be.
Taiwan if
I was
there's
going to
something
say I don't
there.
think it's going to be their homeland either, though. I think it's going to be a taken over area somewhere that it's going to happen. It's
It's
going
going
to
to
be
be Russia and Ukraine,
exactly.
except maybe we intervene and we don't let Taiwan fight their own battle or whatever.
I don't know. At this point, maybe we just send over a bunch of money and hope for the best. That seems to be what's been going on, and it's fine.
Did you see that this newest thing? Like there was like an accounting error, and there was like an extra couple $1 billion that was sent over there. No,
Crazy.
dude.
I think they're honestly just making excuses to get out of this deficit. I truly think that that's what that accounting error is.
Bro, we're
Yeah,
paying for
well,
all this
and you're
fucking
paying for
Ukraine
it. Oh,
support with
that's the crazy thing is,
inflation.
yeah, you're caught between do we print more money and there's inflation, or do we default? It's like it's man,
They're always going to print more money. They're always going
always
to
I
gonna
was
print
gonna
print
more
more
say I
money.
money.
don't. So defaulting is different than printing more money. Printing
No, I
more
know that.
money
I'm saying you go
is
one way
just
or the
a
other.
well,
Not
they
either is not a good
coincide. So
choice.
part of the problem is COVID happened, and then we printed a bunch more money because we claimed we didn't have money, and then all of a sudden inflation's super high, but we still need to do all this stuff. So now we're out of money. So even if you print more money, people can't pay the banks. People can't pay. It's all a vicious cycle. It's one of those things
Yeah,
where at the end of the day, I think we need to take a step back in certain realms, and instead of going, you know what, let's just forgive this, or let's just not forgive this, maybe we start asking a question about, and this has nothing to do with vaccines or anything, this is the other hot topic in my life that I like to talk about, is the student loan debt. Is everybody seems to think that that's the driving force of the debt right now. Maybe instead of sitting here and going, oh, we're in trouble because you took 2 years off without making people pay their loans, and then other people are like, you should forgive loans. Maybe we should start asking why we're $2 billion in student loan debt. Like, why is that a thing? Why is college
trillion.
costing that much money to people?
Bro, that's not even close to the issue, right? If people are actually making that argument, that's just fucking
Wait, is
It's
it two?
stupid.
you,
Is it only 2 billion or is it 2 trillion?
I
it's
say
two
if it's
trillion. I said trillion. I
oh,
said
you said
trillion.
Oh, okay.
billion. You
No,
said
I'm sorry.
billion.
It's 2 trillion. It's two
Oh,
trillion.
okay. Then
Yeah.
maybe it's a bigger
Yeah.
issue.
I mean, it's a
I think it's
lot.
because
But
the
the
loan
problem
rates are
is,
predatory.
well,
They're
so it's not even the rates, it's loans in general. You never get taught what a student loan is. And then you
yeah,
go
it's
to
true.
college
Yep.
and they're like, do you need a loan? And then it's not like, oh, okay, you owe the university $5,000. I used to go to school and I could find out that if I owed the school $5,000 and I took out $15,000, I didn't have to get a job that semester. I had $10,000 sitting in my wallet for the semester.
There's not enough education before. There's not
Not
enough
even
education
close.
at the high school
Not even
level to
close.
educate our
I don't
kids
know.
Not
before.
even
And,
close.
When
and
I was going to buy a house and I
Mhm.
was having the guy run the numbers and I was looking at a model, I didn't realize this until a year and a half ago. I wanted a loan for we'll say X, okay? Then I saw that the interest was Y. It was I was going to pay more over the course of 30 years for this loan than I was going to pay more in interest. than for the loan that I was looking to take out.
That's different than the student loan issue.
Yeah,
though.
no, the
Well,
student
no, but
loan
I'm
issue.
saying
So
I don't mean
the
student
other
loans. You said
problem-
loans, and I thought you said
No,
loans in
no,
general.
student loans. So the other problem with student loans, though, is, and it needs to be raised the question: why does student A go to state university and pay $10,000 a year, and student B go to private university and pay $80,000 a year? What is student B getting that student A is not getting?
Well,
That's-
school's a business now, right?
Which is
business.
disgusting. Which is
Yeah.
absolutely disgusting.
But we don't teach our kids. What I try to tell my little cousins was, you could do 2 years at a community college, pay almost nothing. Right?
Hi, that's where I teach now. I already told
Yeah.
Caitlin my son is going to. If I'm still teaching there,
Yeah.
he's going there.
Well, that's
for-
because
the
it's like,
first
oh,
2
you're not
years
going
at
to a
least.
4-year school. You get shit
It-
on if you're going to county, right?
But
It's
you
like
can
a
still
negative-
but you can still go to a 4-year after. You only have to go for 2 years.
No, I know,
Yeah.
but when you're in high school,
Plus,
everybody wants to say, "I'm going
the other
to this
the other big
college,"
thing
or-
that's sad is that, and again, yes, there's a lot of problems with non-education of the students, but this is also something that parents need to take advantage of that isn't taught to parents. I just opened one today for Colin. It's called the 529C. I put in like $150, and it's an investment account, but it's an investment account that only can be used for school. So I can feed it if I want to, or I don't, and I just let my market do it for it.
This is going to be a different topic. Let's keep talking about this, but remind me before we switch about something else you should do for Colin. Maybe
I'm done with
okay,
this.
we'll talk about it now.
Yeah.
So you could start an IRA for him at a super young age.
Yes,
Right?
yes. We've looked
At
into
like
this.
at like fucking 8 years old.
Yes.
So the way, and don't quote me on this, do a little research, but if you have a company, like you own for example, like a rental property, right? And he does a job at your rental property, like paints walls, and you pay him a realistic wage, $20 an hour, $30 an hour. You keep it under the, I think like $6,000 minimum, where he's in the 0% tax bracket. He could put you could put all of that $6,000 into an IRA when he's 8 years old,
Yes.
right? Or a Roth IRA at 8 years old that's going to compound for the next 70 fucking years.
Mm-hmm.
Bro, by the time he's 18, that if you do $6,000 a year at 4% interest, I'm sure it's over 100K, right?
Yes. Dude, Roth, if you can get innings into Roths are so much better than 401ks.
And you can do it at
so
I
much.
can't contribute on it. You can.
Yeah,
Can you contribute?
There's limits. There's limits. You can only put in a certain amount a year, I think.
There's limits on your income level,
Also your income
and how much you can contribute.
Yeah, the reason I knew about the 529 is we just finished setting up our wills and like the trust for him and stuff, so that he's taken care of.
Start
Am I in the?
a lawn mowing business in your neighborhood. And
That's it. Yeah.
You
Literally-
run it. He's your only employee.
Yep.
And you pay him.
I'm in the
there's plenty of
grass right
parents
now,
that-
boys.
Yeah,
there's
I mow
plenty
the
of parents
lawn
that
at lunch.
work and do that. Wait, I didn't know he had 104 fever. From what?
He got his 1-year vaccines a week ago, so it's reaction to that.
Oh. I noticed how you didn't bring that up when we were talking about vaccines.
Well, I mean, I can bring it up and you can edit it in if you want. It's pretty well documented that children after their 1-year vaccines have a reaction that's a fever. That's literally your
What?
body's response to the vaccine. There you
Hold
go.
on.
Dude, I feel like when I had a fever that high, no joke, the reason I have an astigmatism is because I had like a high fever and it dried out the fluid in my eye. That's kind of like, yeah, I didn't realize it was that they would become that high. Is he getting better?
Today should be the peak. We'll see how tomorrow goes. Caitlin's got to stay home tomorrow though, because I got to teach and I can't send him to daycare with that fever.
Yeah, I hope he gets better soon. So yeah, we'll just wrap it up. So I think we talked about briefly, what did we disagree on? I think the only thing we disagreed on, and not necessarily was were people forced or not. I think it was really semantics. Seth, you had said that it wasn't being forced. It was, you said ultimatum. Tyler felt that it was forced. I felt that it was strongly
forced for some.
coerced.
Yeah, I think we said
forced
for some people.
I was gonna say, I think we
outlined that one well. I think somewhere. Yeah.
So I think overall we are aligned. Hopefully that sounds logical. Hopefully that was a fair assessment. Probably should reiterate the fact that none of us are experts in the medical field. None of this is advice. This is all personal opinion. Don't do anything under our advisement. I don't know if you guys want to add anything there, but overall civil conversation, a lot more civil than I thought it would be. I figured at some point we'd be banging heads a little bit, but I think overall we
I thought for sure you'd make more jokes.
I'm very shocked.
I want it to be respectful.
Yeah, the overhit on that one, I guess. Tyler and I thought it was gonna be real fast.
Yeah.
Honestly, I didn't know how to even I just don't know how I feel overall. I can't say like I can't say I feel so strongly one way or the other. So I did want to do more active listening, and I also wanted to be fair because I know that, like Seth, you said you were doing a lot of research. I know Tyler, you listened to a 3 hour podcast. So
A
me,
lot
I
of
just
research.
yeah, a lot of research. So I think but yeah. So that's episode number. Who knows what this is going to be? What are we
6 or
even at
7.
right now? Six or
6 or
seven.
7.
6 or 7, not bad.
Got it. Before we go, real quick, submarine.
I think
Submarine.
I think aliens took it out.
Pop culture thing. They took it out.
Yeah. I
I
think I don't know.
Do you think? I mean, well, are they out of? I think they might be out of air now. There's literally.
I
Did we talk about there's countdowns on like the news? Literally has
I think
countdowns.
I think no one was in it to begin with.
Oh, that's right. Wait, were you the one that the
I
theory
think
that
I
they
think
faked their
no
deaths?
one's in it. I think no one's in it to begin with.
I would love that if like 5 years from now they spotted some guy on some beach in Puerto Rico or Brazil or somewhere, and it was one of those guys.
Seth, you're really a conspiracy theorist now, huh?
Yeah.
Why
Really.
not? It's fun, right?
Yeah.
Really? Was 9/11 an inside job?
Oh
Dude,
my
too
God.
soon, dude. Too soon.
Dude, I was on Twitter and
Ugh.
somebody posted something. It was like never forget, and it was like the third building.
Do you know there's like a 20-minute video. It's probably not on YouTube anymore, but there's like a 20-minute video where someone draws diagrams and does like computer depiction of how it could have been an inside job. Like there's explosion points inside the building. Yeah.
Yeah,
You didn't
there's all
know
those
this?
videos too where you see like the little explosions and all that, but
Yeah.
then they say it's actually the floors coming down and the
Yeah.
pressure blowing it out.
I think the best conspiracy of all is that Y2K actually did happen, because look at how good life was leading up to 2000, and then from 2000 everything's just kind of spiraled into the shitter.
So do you
So-
think it was more of like a I was gonna say Nosferatu, more of a Nostradamus type thing where it
Well,
was
like it was more of like a
Nosferatu.
Mayan calendar end of days
Yeah,
thing,
yeah.
but it wasn't like a
2012.
one day. Yeah, but it wasn't like a one day thing. Like it was like, all right, Y2K, life's gonna change, and by life's gonna change, that means the next 50 years are gonna be shit.
Yeah, well, they're certainly not totally wrong.
Oh, guys, come on. This is what I let off with. This is the best time to be
No,
alive.
it is. You're
Come
right.
on.
Dude,
It
you know
is.
what? Actually, here's one thing I'll say.
You're gonna go to bed tonight. You're not worried about some fucking guy with an axe coming in and chopping your head off. You're not sleeping in the fucking
Well,
dirt,
now
right?
if we were in the metaverse, someone might have used an axe a few times and
It
become
might have.
And then you're gonna
You
wake
know
up
what?
and
In
live with your
America,
wife
you
again.
could sleep, in
Circle
America,
back.
you could sleep with a 45 next to your pillow in case someone with an axe does come inside. You could blow them the fuck away.
Yo, did you see
But-
that Patriots player that got arrested with those guns and those extendo
I
clips?
saw it quick. I didn't see.
No.
I didn't read
He
on it
had
though.
2 guns with extendo clips at the airport, and I guess his argument was he grabbed the wrong bag.
Might not be lying. Fair
Who
enough.
was it?
Fair
Who
enough.
was it?
One of their linebackers. You say fair enough, Rich. I feel like a bag full of clothes and a bag full of guns might feel a little different.
Jack
Wet
Jones.
clothes?
Yeah,
Wet
one's a little
clothes?
bit heavier and makes some clinking sounds.
Yeah.
Maybe some wet clothes. Who knows?
And they were loaded.
Yeah, he had 2. I don't know if they were loaded, but they had extendo mags.
Yeah,
Jack
that's
Jones, second year with the Patriots.
it's those Boston sports, dude. Never would happen in New York. Even though Plaxico Burress shot himself in the leg. Even though I don't know if he was in New York when that happened. Wait, before we go, because you mentioned something that this is maybe a good message for a lot of people, right? Because to your point, we do live, I think. Look, there's a lot of flaws, and like we discussed, like there's a lot of things that make you question some stuff. I think it's sloppy and all this kind of stuff. But like someone that like me, like we were talking about depression yesterday when we were talking about like just losing
was
weight
yesterday?
and like that was just yesterday. So someone that's kind of like suffered from anxiety for Seth, you were there actually. Remember you took me to the hospital because you thought I was
Yeah.
having a heart attack. So
Yep.
that was what 2011. So ever since
Yeah.
then, there's been times where I've been fine. There's been days where or like weeks at a stretch where like I felt like I couldn't get like a full breath of air. Like not that I was like huffing and puffing, but I just felt like I couldn't fully expand my diaphragm. It's anxiety. And obviously depending on what's going on in my life, it can get worse, it can get better. But I would say to anyone that's kind of dealing with depression or that, at least if you're living in America, I mean, not everyone has the best situation. And obviously it's like some people definitely have the right to be depressed or anxious for sure. But I do like to take a step back and just like kind of pinch myself and say, like, dude, you got the golden ticket. Like you grew up in the 90s in America, in like Jersey, like you had a phenomenal family. You got a good career now. You've got great friends. Like people literally like 99.9% of human history, everyone that ever lived throughout history would probably kill to have your life. right? Like you said, what like people have huge water problems, like the access to water, right?
Dude,
Like
a quarter of the world doesn't have access to safe drinking water.
bro,
Think
like I
about it.
literally like after this podcast, I'm gonna go just piss in fresh water, like right over there and flush it
Right.
down.
I'm
Right
gonna down some
tomorrow,
glasses of water too, and I'm gonna
take
enjoy
a
the hell
fucking
out of them.
shit in fresh water and just flush it down. Right, like there's a lot of stuff to be grateful for. So when life seems like it sucks, just sort of like stop yourself and just really assess like I'm not saying like, hey, you should always say it could be worse, but like there's a lot of things to be grateful for, and it's easy to forget that when you're like, you got your nose in a phone or stuff like that. But yeah, we do live in a good country. It's not infallible, but I mean, I'll die here either way.
I don't know. You just said
Unless
you're
there's some
moving to
tax
Puerto
breaks.
Rico.
Unless there's some tax
I mean,
breaks
it
in
sounds
Puerto
like you're
Rico.
moving for tax breaks, dude. You just got to end
I
it
wouldn't
with
die
what
there. I wouldn't die
you
there.
gotta.
I would just build a nest egg there.
You gotta end it with what Creed Bratton said on The Office, man. I already won the lottery. I was born in the U.S. of A, baby.
Yeah, man. It's like Kenny Powers. Anything that comes out of his mouth, probably something you should live your life by as well. Have you watched Eastbound and Down?
No, because I'm
You neither of you?
no.
Do you know Danny McBride?
Yes, and we know that you quoted that stupid fucking movie with him and James Franco
Yeah, a million
regularly, and
times.
it was not a funny movie.
Oh, Your Highness. Yeah. No, I was thinking of This Is the End.
That guy's a dickless traitor or whatever.
It's the only line I know from that entire movie.
And he actually doesn't have
Dickless
a
I never
fucking
even.
dick.
I don't think I've ever even seen the fucking movie, and I know the line.
You don't waste your
Dude.
time. It's terrible.
That scene is phenomenal because they made it look like he actually doesn't have a dick. That thing is a dickless traitor. No, okay.
Jesus.
Eastbound and Down is literally the funniest show on TV. It's on HBO. I would watch it now before they take it down over the next 3 years because there's the first 5 minutes of the show. There's a lot of things that are said which are very politically incorrect. And the whole show, there's a lot of things that are just
I
like
mean,
risque. That's the funniest.
It's Always
show.
Sunny is still producing new episodes on regular cable.
No,
So
dude, you need to listen to.
I think that
I've
Eastbound and Down
watched
is
It's Always
okay.
Sunny, dude. I've watched. No, I'll send you the intro scene. And
Did
you'll be
you
like,
did you
"Holy
watch
shit."
the episode where they got electrocuted and turned black?
I don't think I did. I don't think I saw that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, It's Always Sunny is still on.
wait, is that was recent?
4 or 5 years ago, maybe.
Okay, well, also a different climate then. No, I'll send you Eastbound and Down. We're gonna have to edit and circle back. No, point is, everyone go watch Eastbound and Down.
Jesus
it's
Christ.
a hilarious show. It's a hilarious show.
I don't even know where you were going with your statement. I got lost 10 minutes ago.
Well, because you don't get. So he's like the most American guy. He always talks to other people, like when he goes down to Mexico to play baseball, when he's talking to some Russian guy, he just shits on everybody else's country and he's all about being American. And there's one scene where are you guys gonna watch it? Just be honest with me.
No,
Probably not.
Okay, then I'm gonna send you a scene where he like comes out.
I'm
as the
probably not
picture
gonna
in
watch it,
Mexico.
but okay.
Yeah, it's like a 2-minute scene.
You
He
made me
comes
watch
out
that
as
stupid James Franco scene that was dumb. Continue.
dude. That was in hindsight, that movie wasn't as funny as I thought it was when I was like 19 and very immature, but it's still a funny movie.
What movie? I don't even know what.
Your Highness, is that what you're talking about?
No,
Well,
you
the
just sent a
Dickless
clip in
Trader?
the. No, you sent
No,
a clip in the.
Eastbound and Down. Eastbound and Down.
No, you sent a clip the other day of James Franco talking in some horrible accent to some kid about his wife, and I don't know.
No, bro, that wasn't James Franco. That was Sam Hyde.
any videos Rich sends, I don't usually.
I
watch, to be
kind of
honest.
have started treating it like when my dad sends me videos. I wait 10 minutes and then I'm like, that's cool.
Honestly, I open them.
Thanks.
I
No,
open them.
it was Sam Hyde father figure. They're also hilarious videos.
I wouldn't say my thing is particular to Rich, but if somebody sends me a long ass video, I'm not fucking watching it unless it's
Neither
the
am I.
thing I want to watch
Agree
anyway.
there.
Yeah,
Agree there. This is it's like a 3-minute video.
Oh yeah,
I'm not gonna lie. These days I
How's
don't
that too
watch.
long?
Yeah, dude.
What's okay? Give me a good time frame. So
30
If it's not
seconds.
something I'm already interested in, I'm not
30
gonna watch it.
seconds. I
I
want
break my
30
ass
seconds.
for good content. I
30
break my
seconds
ass for
is-
good content.
30 seconds is probably my limit too.
I don't know if
And I'm not gonna lie to you, unless it's after 7 o'clock at night when the kid's gone down. I'm not gonna watch it at all, even if it's 30 seconds. I'd like don't look at my phone during the day because he's too fucking busy. So just don't send me stuff during the day.
Fair enough. All right, one last thing.
Again. For
How
the
many
fifth
one
time.
last things are there gonna
one last
be?
thing about 50. I don't want to go because I love talking to you guys. Are you guys reading any new books? Any books?
I'm reading the next in the list of the Jack Carr books. You guys got to check these Jack Carr books out, man. They're so good.
What's Jack
First
Clark?
one is Terminal List. They made the Amazon show with it.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
Chris Pratt.
Yep, yep.
Oh, okay.
And he's got like 6 out now, but they're all following that same character. They're so good. They're so good. He's basically ex-CIA, ex Navy SEAL, and now in the third book he's working for the CIA.
Okay. Okay. Interesting.
So good.
I'm reading the Gallic, or not the Gallic War. I'm reading the Civil War by Julius Caesar. Very, like I said
Interesting.
before, very, very interesting, dude. It's the lives that those guys lived back then. By the way, are fucking like. Nobody will ever live that type of life again. Like you
Yeah, I
rise
hope
through the
not.
ranks, you
I was gonna
command
say, I
100,000.
hope
Yeah,
not too.
I
They
guess so.
definitely
Yeah.
did not have access to clean water and facilities.
Well,
Maybe in
even
a
that, dude.
catastrophic event, like a meteor hits the world and we lose all like electricity and
Then maybe, but then like they like,
motor
dude, they
vehicles.
like conquered. They were like politicians. They were conquerors. They were just like, I mean, just the things that they went through. Like, I mean, less than 1% of people in world history have ever gone through that stuff. But these are truly larger than life figures. So, what about you, Tyler? Anything? Reading anything?
I was thinking about reading or listening to RFK Jr.'s book just to learn more about him.
Damn, you're a huge fan after that podcast. I gotta
No,
listen to
I just I'm honestly I wouldn't
You're
say huge fan.
You're interested in learning more.
Yeah, I would say of the 4 potential candidates for running for president.
Who
He
are
might
the
be my
four?
favorite.
You got Trump. You got Biden.
Yeah,
Well,
that was
there's okay, so there's like 9 Republicans right now. There's
Yeah.
one
DeSantis.
independent. There's one independent, and there's 3 Democrats, I think.
yeah. I only know of
Who are
Trump,
the 3 Democrats?
Biden,
Biden,
RFK.
RFK.
Current 2024.
Is
Are they not
Tulsi
having
Gabbard running
debates?
yet?
Did I hear that they're not having a Democratic debate or something at the?
Oh, I did hear something like that because everyone's complaining. It's like, how are you not going to do debates? And
Yeah, the
like,
fuck?
it's like, that's what I was saying the other day. President-elects are ordained. They're not actually.
The other Democrat is Marianne Williamson.
Who the fuck is that?
No idea. And then the Republicans are Trump, Nikki Haley, Vivek Ramaswamy, Asa Hutchinson, Larry Elder, Tim Scott, Rick DeSantis, Mike Pence, Chris Christie, Doug Burgum, and Francis Suarez, and then Colonel West is running as an independent.
Colonel West.
Cornell West, maybe.
I didn't hear any of the I've heard very few of the names that you mentioned. I mean, that's all a bunch of.
Yeah, so I was thinking about listening to his book just because he mentioned it in the podcast. I don't know if I'm actually gonna do it. I'll probably just go back to David Goggins.
Did he just come out with a new one? Did I see that?
Last year.
Okay,
Yeah, December of last year. It's a good one. More of just like fucking insane shit that he did, but
I want to read. Wait, does he ever talk about like his military life or he just like running?
that's about everything.
Well, did he have like what was his career like? His military career?
He doesn't talk a lot about like deployments or anything because did he go on one? I think he went on 1 or 2, but like it's not what his story is about. His story is about overcoming fucking crazy shit.
Yeah.
He talks about all the hell weeks and shit, but
yeah, he went through like 4,
3.
Yeah, I want to bring up books because I know when we first started this podcast, it was like health, wealth, just like self-betterment. So I just figured I'd kind of try and keep us true to our original mission statement. I don't know. That was kind of fishing for, yeah. Anyway, speaking of health.
Wait,
Seth,
so on that note, where are we going to end it with?
when we have a guest.
All right, this has been good. I'm going to bed because I guarantee my kid's going to wake up screaming at 4 a.m. for the 3rd day in a row.
Yep, I'm gonna go watch episode 7 of season 3 of Game of Thrones. I'm almost halfway through.
Oh, dude, that's like. Oh, wait, when was the Red Wedding?
It's
episode
like
9, season 3, episode 9.
Yeah, as in always episode 9 is when shit hits the fan.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, guys. It's a good conversation.
Yep.
Have a good night.